Chapter 1732. Although Chaos City hadn't been built for long, and there weren't many experts who chose to live here, everyone who could afford to stay was an elite. This meant that there was a business opportunity here that everyone envied. An endless stream of merchant caravans passed through the city gates to be interrogated. These merchants all wanted to make a killing in this city. In truth, they'd been thinking the same thing all along, and in the end, it turned out to be just as they'd expected. The merchants all made a killing, which prompted even more merchants to come here. For a moment, Chaos City felt like a business center. Xiao Yumei had always supported this idea. Chaos City also provided great privacy and preferential policies for foreign merchants and experts who came here to purchase goods. Both merchants and buyers enjoyed admiring this new city. However, the recent atmosphere in Chaos City had been stifling, making it hard for them to breathe. They didn't know what was going on, but they'd discovered that Chaos City's security had become much stricter than before. There were also several times more checks and patrols within the city. Every single Chaos City guard had an indescribably grave look in their eyes. This made everyone in the city feel like something big had happened in Chaos City. It had. Why haven't there been any results yet? Xiao Yan stood in front of the hall and paced back and forth. There were several guest elders in the room. In terms of rank, Xiao Yan was actually on the same level as them. However, he'd once been the Lightning Emperor, so his aura was a bit stronger. As he furrowed his brows, practically no one in the room dared to meet his gaze. They all stood on either side of the room, their hands clasped behind their back. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, the sound of something slicing through the air could be heard. When Xiao Yan heard it, he looked outside and saw Xiao Hu hurrying in with a few Emperor-level generals in tow. Third Elder. Xiao Hu bowed deeply towards Xiao Yan. The Emperor-level generals behind him cupped their hands in greeting as well. Xiao Yan quickly walked up to them. Before he could say anything, Xiao Hu looked up, his expression dark. We went to the ancients, but they wouldn't let us in at all. They said that without their summons, we can't enter and leave as we please. Didn't you tell them that you were Alliance Head Ye's subordinates, and that you had something to report to him? Asked Xiao Yan with a frown. We told you, Third Elder. One of the generals said with a bitter expression, but they said they didn't know Alliance Master Yi at all. Deacon Xiao Hu got into an argument with him, and the Gu clan directly sent an imperial monarch to chase us out. Moreover, Deacon Xiao Hu was even injured because of this. After that, he even threatened. The ancients don't have someone like Alliance Head Yi. If we dare cause trouble in their territory again, they'll show us no mercy. Only then did Xiao Yan notice that Xiao Hu's right arm hung limply by his side. There was even a trace of dried blood at the corner of his shirt. Preposterous. What is the ancient race trying to do? Xiao Yan slammed the table beside him, turning it to dust. The other guest chamberlains and elders in the room couldn't help but shrink their necks and lower their heads even more. They were the ones who found Alliance Master Yi, and now they're saying that they don't even know who Alliance Master Yi is, and they even attacked our people. Just because they were aboriginals, they could do whatever they wanted. Do they really think the Upheaval Alliance is easy to bully? A thunderous roar exploded through the room. Lightning crackled around Xiao Yan's body, casting the room in a deathly white. Third Elder, please calm down. We're talking about the ancient race. You know what they're capable of. If the ancient race heard what you're saying, the Upheaval Alliance really might not be able to hold out against them. So what if they heard? Xiao Yan glared viciously at the guest chamberlain who'd just spoken, his bloodshot eyes radiating an intimidating, ominous light. The guest chamberlains were so frightened by his gaze that they hurriedly lowered their heads. Xiao Yan's eyes were also bloodshot. Just because the ancient race is powerful, they can detain the Alliance head and prevent him from returning? Just because the ancient race is powerful, they can be unreasonable. Everyone in the room cowered in fear, not daring to respond. Enraged, Xiao Yan paced back and forth in the room for a long time. The others lowered their heads and waited. A while passed. Xiao Hu, you've worked hard. Go back and get some rest. Xiao Hu walked up to Xiao Hu, patted him on the shoulder, and took a deep breath. Only then did he look up. He glanced at the ribbon on the table, as well as the letter written entirely with divine power. Don't worry about my injuries. Right now, what's important is how we deal with the current situation. Xiao Yan looked deeply at the ribbon. It and the letter had been delivered to the Upheaval Alliance 3 days ago. It was this letter that had instantly made Xiao Yan so restless and agitated. What else can we do? Keep asking the ancient race for him. Alliance head Yi has to return. No matter what the ancient race says, he has to come back and take charge. Xiao Hu, no. You're injured. You'd best stay in the Alliance and recuperate. How about this, Fifth Elder? Yes, sir. The fifth elder of the Upheaval Alliance was none other than Wei Jie, the man who'd once helped Yi Zichen manage the Upheaval Alliance. He wasn't particularly talented, and even with the Alliance's constant supply of pills, he was still only a ruler. Given the Upheaval Alliance's current situation, he wasn't qualified to be an elder at all. However, he had Yi Zichen's deep trust, which was why he'd managed to secure a seat among the elders. Although your cultivation isn't high, I'm afraid I can't compare to you when it comes to dealing with people. Although the ancient race has detained our alliance head, he's still an ancient. Even if the Upheaval Alliance goes all out, we might not be their match. You're eloquent, so you'll lead the team this time. I'll find you 3 emperors and 10 emperors. Once they head to the ancient race, they'll definitely bring Alliance head Yi back. Alright. Unless I die in the ancient race's hands, Alliance head Yi will definitely return to the Upheaval Alliance. Wei Jie solemnly vowed, his high-spirited words echoing in the room for a long time. Everyone knew that the Upheaval Alliance needed Yi Zichen to return and take charge. Xiao Yan didn't dare guarantee that he'd be able to prioritize the bigger picture. What's going on here? Why does our elder Wei sound so hot-blooded? At that moment, a low, joking voice came from outside the room. Everyone looked toward the door and saw 2 figures standing in front of it. A beam of light shone on them through the gaps in the clouds, causing their clothes to be dyed with a layer of golden light. They really did look like saviors. Xiao Yan, who'd been fuming all this time, suddenly let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 1733. Seeing the letter was like seeing your face. I've long since heard of the Third Era's Alliance head Yuanya's fame. Although we've never met, we've known each other for a long time. A few days ago, one of the Alliance head's generals appeared outside our borders. I saw that he was injured, so I invited the generals to come and treat your injuries. Little did I know, my goodwill was misinterpreted by the Alliance head's subordinates. Countless experts have arrived at our borders, and I'm terrified. Fortunately, the Alliance head's subordinates understand the bigger picture and understood what was going on. I've always been hospitable, and I know they're close friends of the Alliance head. Furthermore, one of them is the Alliance head's lover, so I invited them to stay as guests. The Naiwa clan's land is barren, and our food supply is barely enough to make a living. I can't neglect my esteemed guests, but my clansmen have suffered. I can't rest easy. Fortunately, the Alliance head's lover understands the bigger picture and empathizes with our people. However, the Alliance head has to personally escort them back before they're willing to return. I know how much work the Alliance head has to do, and I can't bear to tire you out. However, this matter concerns the lifeblood of our clansmen, so I have no choice but to ask you to come to our lands and escort them back. In order to prove my words are true, I've brought the Alliance head's red scarf with me. I hope Alliance head Yi can empathize with our hardship. I really want to be friends with you. I swear to the heavens that I bear you no ill will. I hope you'll do me the honor of visiting us. As soon as Yi Zichen opened the envelope, golden words appeared before his eyes. If he didn't think too much about it, he'd just read the letter. It was an invitation letter. It was also a request letter filled with a strong sense of pleading. The corners of Yi Zichen's lips curled into a smile, then he put the letter away. The golden words slowly faded from sight. Everyone in the room had seen this letter before. Everyone who'd read it stood with their hands by their side. Xiao Yan, who'd been waiting for Yi Zichen to speak, clenched his fists tightly. From time to time, his knuckles cracked. Yi Zichen placed the letter back on the table. Everyone in the room looked at him as he picked up the ribbon on the table. Yi Zichen remembered the ribbon very clearly. It was a gift he had given to Xiao Yumei on her birthday. Xiao Yumei had always treated this ribbon as a treasure and always carried it with her. The fact that the ribbon had appeared here proved that Xiao Yumei was in the hands of the messenger. As for her situation, Yi Zichen had no way of knowing. Yi Zichen put the scarf away, then sat down. Xiao Yan didn't see the seriousness or impatience in his eyes. Instead, there was a faint hint of a smile. Xiao Hu, what happened to your arm? Yi Zichen, who was sitting on the chair, saw Xiao Hu's limp arm. Reporting to Alliance Master, this subordinate is fine. This must be done by the ancient race. Yi Zichen had heard some of Xiao Hu's conversation before entering the room, so he had a rough idea of where Xiao Hu's injuries came from. Gu Xuanda was really something. Not only did he throw him into the spatial fault, but he also dealt such a heavy blow to his subordinate. The ancient race is really going overboard. Seems like I've got to have a good chat with them when I'm free. Otherwise, they would really think that the world is theirs. Alliance Master, this has nothing to do with you. Yi Zichen interrupted Xiao Hu, then looked ahead with a profound gaze. Alliance Master, let's keep talking. This letter is pretty interesting. Interesting? Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes. What? Is it boring? Didn't you see what it says? Yumei and the others went to the Master's clan as guests. The Master is simply too hospitable, to the point that his clansmen are about to starve to death. Now, he's begging us to hurry up and bring Yumei and the others back. Yi Zichen laughed, then continued. Yumei and the others are the same. They just like to play around and make friends, but her eyesight is too poor. Doesn't she know that she's starved to poverty? She's throwing a tantrum and asking me to bring her back. Forget it. Perhaps I really haven't spent enough time with her lately. I need to find some time to spend more time with her. Yi Zichen muttered to himself, but little did he know that everyone else in the room buried their heads deeper and deeper. They could all sense the hidden fury in Yi Zichen's words. It was like a volcano about to erupt. Nothing special about it, but they couldn't help but feel their hearts race. However, Xiao Yan couldn't tell. Or rather, given the current situation, he wasn't in the mood to listen. Xiao Yumei was his big sister. Ever since he'd left the Lightning Emperor's estate, or perhaps since Xiao Ting betrayed the God race and joined the demons, his only family had been Xiao Yumei and Xiao Hu. Now that Xiao Yumei was in trouble, no one could understand how anxious he was. If not for Xiao Yumei's warning to Xiao Yan to prioritize the bigger picture, he would have led the upheaval alliance and slaughtered them long ago. He'd thought Yi Zichen would understand his feelings, but now it seemed. I really misjudged you. As soon as Xiao Yan said that, everyone else in the room looked in his direction, wide-eyed. Xiao Hu repeatedly shot him a meaningful glance, indicating that he shouldn't speak carelessly. However, Xiao Yan ignored his warning. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes and laughed. Let him speak. Xiao Hu didn't dare try anything funny. Yi Zichen looked at Xiao Yan. Continue. Humph. Xiao Yan snorted angrily. Don't look at me like that to scare me. I'm the Lightning Emperor, and my position isn't any lower than your upheaval alliances. If you want to pressure me with your power, there's no need for that. You're overthinking things. I'm just telling you to continue. I really want to know what kind of person you think I am. Laughed Yi Zichen. At this moment, the atmosphere in the room had already frozen. The sun had set at some point, and a layer of mist had enveloped the city. The orange-red light hit the fog, turning the entire world dark red. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes and smiled. He gestured with his eyes for Xiao Yan to continue speaking. Xiao Yan didn't hesitate at all and snorted, "Fine. That ribbon belongs to my sister. There's no way you wouldn't recognize it. You gave it to my sister and she carries it around like a treasure. It's clear how infatuated she is with you. But you have countless beauties by your side, and you're not loyal. But my sister told me that as long as you held her in your heart, it was fine. She even told me not to overthink things. I agreed, thinking that as long as you treated her well, I'd be happy. But what did you do?" "Xiao Yan, stop," growled Xiao Hu. "Why shouldn't I?" Xiao Yan turned and glared at Xiao Hu. "He pushed all the Alliance's affairs onto my sister while he enjoyed his freedom. The contents of that letter were clear. The Vice Alliance heads and the others had been detained, and their fates were unknown. You and I were both worried about my sister, but he... My sister... What the hell is this man doing?" Chapter 1734. Sometimes anger was like this. When a person was truly enraged, he would ignore everything in front of him. It didn't matter if they were facing an undefeatable opponent or someone of high status. In this situation, they didn't care about any of that. He simply wanted to vent the anger in his heart. Xiao Yan was a prime example. Xiao Yumei was extremely important to him, so important that she was more important than his own life. Her uncertain fate had caused Xiao Yan to lose all sense of reason. Then there was Yi Zichen's inaction. His cold demeanor was like a catalyst, fuel for his rage. If he said no, it didn't matter if he could or couldn't say it, if he should or shouldn't say it. Even if it was some trivial matter, it would not matter at all. Even if it was a trivial matter. Everything would appear in Xiao Yan's mind, and Yi Zichen's flaws would be magnified without limit. Xiao Hu retreated. Was he supposed to tell Xiao Yan that Yi Zichen wasn't actually like he thought? Would Xiao Yan listen? Was that even possible? He knew that even if he tried to persuade Xiao Yan wouldn't listen. On the contrary, it would only serve as a catalyst for his rage. The only difference between humans and wild beasts was their intelligence. When humans lost their rationality, they were no different from wild beasts. In fact, their bodies were far inferior. Rather than trying to persuade Xiao Yan, it was better to tell Yi Zichen not to bicker with him. Alliance head. The others didn't dare speak up for Xiao Yan for fear of getting dragged into this mess. Xiao Hu was different. He was related to Xiao Yan. Even looking at Xiao Yan was disrespectful. The others didn't dare speak up for him, but Xiao Hu had to. Even if he did, he might get dragged into this mess. Men. However, Yi Zichen didn't give Xiao Hu a chance to speak. As soon as he spoke, several Emperor-level experts appeared outside the room. Most of these experts were from the First Era, and they obeyed Yi Zichen. As for the others, they wouldn't listen, not even to Xiao Yumei. Strangely enough, they were fugitives from the First Era. By the time they arrived in the Third Era, most of them were rulers, but not long after, their cultivation had risen by leaps and bounds. 30% of the previous rulers had become emperors. Only the higher-ups of the Upheaval Alliance knew about this. Not even the other great emperors of the Divine Mountains knew. If they knew Yi Zichen had hundreds of thousands of emperors on the 10th Divine Mountain, and that number was still rising, what would he think? One had to know that the other Divine Mountains, although there was hidden energy, it was only a small part of it. These emperors were the reason Yi Zichen didn't even spare the ancients a glance. The ancient race's strength lay in the number of the arch-experts they had. Of course, it was also because of the existence of a half-step transcendent. However, if the two clans were to fight, the energy of a half-step transcendent could destroy the world with a wave of their hands. The Master of the Laws couldn't possibly allow them to do as they pleased. Otherwise, the ancients wouldn't have been able to live in a subdimension. The other races believed that the ancient race was transcendent. Little did they know that this kind of transcendence was just a method of the ancient race. As soon as the great emperor entered the room, his aura locked onto Xiao Yan. As Xiao Yumei's younger brother, Xiao Yan had once been the emperor of lightning punishment. He could be considered a core member of the upper echelon, so he knew who these people were. He could resist. With his strength as an imperial lord, it was easy for him to escape from the hands of these imperial lords. But he knew even if he managed to break out of the room, there would be more emperors and emperors waiting for him outside. Detain Xiao Yan. With a single command, the emperors seized Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan didn't resist, but his bloodshot eyes continued to glare at Yi Zichen. His eyes burned with fury and hatred. He wanted nothing more than to skin Yi Zichen alive. Yi Zichen, even if you don't like me, my sister is infatuated with you. You can't let her down like this. If anything happens to my sister, even if I become a vengeful spirit, I won't let you off. Take him away. The imperial lord grabbed Xiao Yan by the shoulder and led him out of the room. Even though they'd been gone for some time, Xiao Yan's furious roars still echoed through the room. The others fell silent. Xiao Hu gnashed his teeth as he watched Xiao Yan being dragged away. Even the stewards he was on good terms with gestured for him not to say anything. But he couldn't just sit back and watch. Just now, Xiao Yan knew that if he said those things, Yi Zichen wouldn't let him off easily, but he'd done it anyway. This was human nature. Humans have feelings, especially familial love. Alliance head Xiao Yan, I don't blame him. Yi Zichen rubbed his aching temples, his expression weary. I know he did it for Yumei's sake. He's Yumei's little brother, so it's normal for him to say such things. I don't blame him, and in fact, I'm happy for Yumei for having a little brother like that, but this isn't our home. This is the Upheaval Alliance. Since this was a matter of the imperial court, he couldn't allow his personal feelings to get mixed up. At a time like this, all captives are equal. Yumei is no different. I only sent Xiao Yan away to calm him down. If he causes trouble like this, he won't be able to handle the situation. When he heard this, Xiao Hu calmed down. Little did he know, Pilar's brows twitched slightly. He'd come with Yi Zichen and witnessed everything. When Xiao Yan was taken away, based on his demonic gaze, he knew this guy was beyond saving. He never would have guessed Yi Zichen would say something like that. Despite Xiao Yan's words, he fiercely maintained a clear head. Bonus points. If they worked together, it would be hard to avoid a rift between him and Yi Zichen in the future. If Yi Zichen was a rational person, he wouldn't act on impulse. He needed allies like that. Xiao Hu retreated, knowing that Xiao Yan would be fine. He relaxed somewhat, but Yumei and the other situation couldn't be delayed. Alliance head, how do you plan to save the Vice Alliance head and the others? We can't go rashly, said Wei Jie. This is clearly a Hongmen banquet. If you go, you'll be surrounded by danger. Furthermore, we might have missed something important. What is it? Asked Xiao Hu. The messenger didn't give us an address at all. Even if we know it's the outside is too vast. How are we supposed to find them? Xiao Hu and the others suddenly froze. They thought back to the letter they'd received. There really wasn't an address, not even a direction. Xiao Yan, who was worried about Yumei, hadn't noticed. Xiao Hu hadn't noticed, and neither had the others. What are they trying to do? Roared Xiao Hu. They'd invited Yi Zichen as a guest, but hadn't given him an address? Were they toying with them? Chapter 1735. As Yi Zichen shifted his gaze, the others looked in his direction as well. Especially after what he'd just said. Partners. The alien-like guy in front of me is actually Yi Zichen's partner? Everyone couldn't help but look at Pilar in a higher light. By now, the Upheaval Alliance had long since become an existence that neither the God Realm nor the Three Realms could ignore. It had an enormous alliance system, and it had internal factions. Countless gods and Yao wanted to join the Upheaval Alliance and rest on this giant tree. However, the Upheaval Alliance had always been strict with its choices of allies. They'd relied on the nine-tailed fox clan, Xia Kiki, Zhuge Kongming, and Wei Chun to get the dragons, vermilion birds, and white tigers to join. Not long ago, these clan heads had joined the Upheaval Alliance. As for the black tortoises, the dragon clan head had tried to plead on their behalf, but Yi Zichen felt there was something strange about them. Even though they were one of the 4 sacred beast clans, the black tortoises hadn't joined the Upheaval Alliance. From this, it was clear that Yi Zichen was very strict with his choices of allies. It wasn't that the strength of their clans affected whether or not they joined the Upheaval Alliance. More importantly, Yi Zichen trusted them. Pilar. From the moment he entered the room, the others had already noticed his presence. Or rather, given his appearance, it was hard to ignore him. Not even Xiao Hu, who'd lived for nearly 10,000 years, had ever seen someone so ugly. It was hard not to take a few glances at him. However, everyone's focus had been on Xiao Yimei and the others, so they hadn't paid much attention to Pilar. Now, Yi Zichen changed the subject to Pilar. More importantly, based on Yi Zichen's words, this alien fellow knew where the God Realm was. Suddenly, Pilar became the focus of everyone's gazes. An ordinary person would have long since collapsed under the pressure of so many emperors staring at them. Pilar just smiled lightly, completely ignoring the gazes of these people. For better or worse, he'd once been a demon king, or rather, he still was. He just didn't have the terrifying power of a demon, nor did he have any loyal subjects. "Do I need to prove my worth?" asked Pilar. "Of course not," said Yi Zichen. "Your existence is the embodiment of your value, but only you can resolve the current situation. We don't have much contact with the Outer Realm God race. They didn't leave their address, so it's very difficult for us to find their location. So you're asking for my help. You could say that, but I prefer to think of it as helping a friend. Friends should help each other. I like this saying." Pilar grinned, but he did not know how ugly his smile was. When the female managers in the room saw his smile, they almost vomited the food they had eaten a few years ago. Yi Zichen tilted his head, then turned to the others in the room. "You don't have to deal with Vice Alliance Master Zhao's matters. Go back and deal with your other matters. Xiao Hu, you stay." Everyone else in the room had left. After the last person had left the room, Xiao Hu used his divine sense to check that there was no one else around. "Alliance Master, you're keeping me here because..." Before he could finish his sentence, Xiao Hu saw a pill being thrown at him. The pill was pink in color, and there was even a hint of fragrance on its surface. It wasn't like other pills, which had a strong medicinal aroma. It was faint, and if you didn't smell it carefully, you wouldn't even notice it. "Alliance Master, this isn't for you to treat your injuries. You could say it's for you to heal." Xiao Hu didn't quite understand what Yi Zichen was trying to say. "What do you mean?" "This is a pill our Hall of Pills developed." The Hall of Pills. This was the Upheaval Alliance's newly established Hall of Pills. Old Lord Taishang was the head of the hall, and there were hundreds of divine-grade pill refiners, tens of thousands of Grandmaster pill refiners, and countless Master pill refiners. The Hall of Pills existed to supply the Upheaval Alliance with pills. Practically 90% of the Upheaval Alliance's pill refiners came from the Hall of Pills. The Alliance Head and Vice Alliance Head were in charge of the Hall of Pills. Given Xiao Hu's level, he had no way of knowing what was going on. However, he knew that while the Hall of Pills was refining, they were also working on a new type of pill. This was what he'd heard from Xiao Yan. "I won't lie to you about this pill, but it's not a finished product." Yi Zichen glanced at the pill in Xiao Hu's hands. "I said it's not a finished product because no one has tested its effects before. Any medicinal pill had to go through thousands of experiments and deliberations before it could be withdrawn. No one knew the effects of a pill that hadn't been tested before. It wasn't impossible for someone to die after eating it. I'm giving this pill to you because I think you're suitable," said Yi Zichen. "Don't blame me for using you to test the pill, but you have the final say. You can't force me to do it. But I have something to tell you. Alliance head, please go ahead. Xiao Hu didn't think Yi Zichen would harm him, but taking an untested pill like this was a recipe for disaster. Who knew what the final outcome would be? Fate was a thing that could be easily misunderstood. He trusted Yi Zichen, but he had to be careful about his own life. Old Lord Taishang personally refined this pill. As for who he is, you should know. He's the pill god who's risen to fame in recent years. It's him? Xiao Hu froze. He'd heard of the pill god before. He'd ascended from the lower realms, and in less than 2 years he'd become the #1 divine-grade pill refiner. His pill refining skills were unparalleled, and quite a few famous divine-grade pill refiners wanted to take him as their master, but he refused. Quite a few factions had extended an olive branch to him, offering generous conditions that even emperors would go green with envy. But this pill god, he still refused. Xiao Hu knew that a pill refiner had arrived in the Upheaval Alliance not long ago, but he never would have guessed it was the pill god. If the pill god had refined this pill, Xiao Hu had much more confidence in it. It seems you know. Yi Zichen noticed Xiao Hu's change in expression and continued. I provided the recipe for this pill. Many great emperors of the Divine Mountains and the Fox Empress know about it, and they're all amazed by it. This is the first pill I've refined, and it's also the one with the most ingredient. This. I know. You've been stuck in the ruler realm for a long time, right? That's right, said Xiao Hu. If you're lucky, this pill might help you directly ascend to the emperor level, but it might also help you become immortal. This is an opportunity, but it's also an abyss. Chapter 1736. The outside. The chaotic void was pitch black as far as the eye could see. Far off in the distance they could just barely make out a single white dot. Pilar said it was the sun, but due to the chaotic space's special properties, light couldn't reach their location. Go Yuzhan and Yin Shang walked beside them. They'd come here on Yi Zichen's orders. Even with Pilar here, the outside god race was still full of unknowns. Furthermore, Pilar had made it very clear. The outside god race was strong, so strong that even a demon king like him couldn't help but pale at the mention of their name. No one knew for sure whether or not the contents of the letter were a trap. No matter who it was, no one could be sure what would happen once they arrived there, so the only thing they could do was to prepare for the worst in advance. As for Suiyun, the Sea Emperor's clone told them that Suiyun had left in a hurry 3 days ago. If nothing unexpected happened, they'd most likely meet again in the God Race. How does it feel to reunite with the God Race so soon? As they strolled through the outer realms, Yi Zichen smiled at Pilar, who was leading the way. Pilar told him everything. Pilar had lost all of his demonic power, gone into hiding in the time corridor, and his entire clan had been annihilated. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that some of his fellow demons might have survived. However, given his current situation, it would be difficult to meet them again. All of this was because of the outside god race. Or rather, it was because of one person. Yi Zichen etched that person's name deeply into his heart. The God King of Destruction, Yale. Was he in a good mood? Pilar stopped in his tracks, and an unnatural expression flashed across his face. The demon race had 13 demon kings in total. The previous 12 had protected the demon race, but Pilar was the only exception. When the outside god race attacked the demon race, his incompetence had led to the demon race's destruction. Needless to say, Pilar's resentment towards Yale went without saying. However, compared to that, he resented his own incompetence even more. Ha! With a stiff smile, Pilar diverted the topic. I should be asking you that. Our fiend race and the god race have known each other for billions of years. It's not the time for the foreign god race to invade the third era yet. What's your mood for meeting the foreign god race so early? Mixed feelings, said Yi Zichen. Pilar's lips curled into a smile. Yi Zichen's answer clearly intrigued her. Why do you say that? The outer realm god race has always been unknown to us. It can be said that we only know of their existence, but we don't know what they are. Their existence only exists in our fantasies. Pilar quietly listened to Yi Zichen, but didn't interrupt. Yi Zichen continued. Being able to see them in advance will at least allow me to have an intuitive understanding of them. Regardless of whether they are strong or weak, it will give me a sense of certainty in my heart, and I won't have to live in fear of the unknown. You know, the unknown is always the scariest. If we don't know what it is, the fear in our hearts will continue to grow. I understand. Pilar smiled and nodded. It wasn't just humans. When any race encountered an unknown situation, they'd take the problem more and more seriously. It was like covering someone's eyes and asking them to pet an adorable white rabbit. The blindfolded person wouldn't know what was in front of them. They'd become fearful and start imagining all sorts of terrifying things, which only served to increase their fear. In truth, at the end of the day, this was a lack of confidence in oneself. If one's heart was strong enough to disregard everything else, then even if there was a lion in front of them, they'd still pet it without the slightest scruple. I hope you won't show any signs of fear when you see the god race. I definitely won't, said Yi Zichen. The worry on his face suddenly vanished, and Yi Zichen laughed. I'm a person who cares a lot about face. When I was young, even if someone older than me tried to hit me and my legs went numb, I'd still glare at them. I care about face. Not bad at all. Pilar smiled and nodded. Yi Zichen was telling the truth, but there was a hint of a joke in his words. He wanted to use this method to calm his heart. I didn't want to be so scared that I couldn't move my legs before entering the Outerium god race. Yi Zichen glanced at Go Yuzhan and Yin Shang. Their mental fortitude seemed a bit better than Yi Zichen's. Before coming, Yi Zichen had already explained everything that might happen to them in the future. Yet even now, the two of them looked completely relaxed. Go Yuzhan, in particular, looked left and right, as if he couldn't stay still. When he saw their expressions, Yi Zichen looked away, looked at Pilar, and asked the question he'd been wanting to ask for a long time. Pilar, did you just say that it's not time to attack the Third Era yet? It seems like you know some inside information. The Third Era was coming to an end. That was common knowledge. However, no one knew when or how it would end. Not even the three emperors knew. From what Pilar had just said, it was obvious he knew when the god race would attack the Third Era. You want to know? Pilar laughed. How could I possibly not want to know? In truth, the outsiders can't just attack on a whim. We need the Third Era to send them a signal. Whether it's the demon race or the god race, we're both first-level races. We can't proactively declare war on lower-level races, but you can. When you send us a signal, we can attack you. Of course, you can do the same. If we destroy you, everything will naturally be over. But if you destroy us, you'll be able to take away our race's rank and become a new first-level race. Take away. Yi Zichen's eyes widened. He never would have guessed that the clash between the god race and the First Era would be a competition between races. The god race was the protector, while the First Era was the challenger. However, this signal was definitely not an ordinary declaration of war. Yi Zichen refused to believe that anyone would be so bored as to initiate a war with the god race. The only possibility was... Pilar chuckled, but before he or Yi Zichen could say anything, three men with burning godheads appeared in the primal chaos around them. Chapter 1737. Their eyes met. The three of them had appeared out of nowhere. Although they were leading the way for Pilar, Yi Zichen and the others maintained absolute vigilance. Along the way, Yi Zichen and the others maintained absolute vigilance. Their divine senses never stopped scanning their surroundings. Even Go Yuzhan, who'd been acting casually, did the same. Their divine senses almost condensed into a dense net. Although the space in the primal chaos void was special and their divine senses couldn't reach as far as they could in the demon realm, they could still scan everything within 1,000 meters. Their divine senses had shrunk, so they had to focus more on the completeness of their coverage. Their divine senses intersected with one another. Even a speck of dust that passed through their divine senses would be noticed. Right now, the 3 extraterritorial Protoss experts that had appeared were less than 100 meters away from them. This was the center of their divine senses. It was easy to imagine how dense it was. Even so, Yi Zichen and the others only noticed them when they took the initiative to reveal themselves. Experts. Go Yuzhan put away his playful thoughts. A black wooden staff appeared in his hand. Yin Shang nodded, and the two of them intentionally moved closer to Yi Zichen and Pilar. Boss, these people won't be easy to deal with, transmitted Go Yuzhan. It was only natural that they wouldn't be easy to deal with. As soon as they arrived, they'd already revealed their identities. They were here on behalf of Yale. This was Yi Zichen's first meeting with the Outworld God race. They wouldn't send their strongest experts, but they wouldn't send mediocre people either. If nothing out of the ordinary happened, these people were probably in the upper echelons of the Outworld God race. They can completely ignore our divine sense net. We have to be careful, said Yin Shang. They can't be underestimated, but there's no need to worry too much, said Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen's divine awareness reached Go Yuzhan and Yin Shang's seas of consciousness, then turned to Puller. Actually, what I'm more curious about is how they knew you were with me. Do you have his imprint on you? Absolutely not. I'm sure of it, swore Pilar. Then the Outworld God race has some tricks up their sleeve. Yi Zichen's gaze darkened and he stared intently ahead. Pilar remained in the time corridor this entire time. Less than 4 hours after Yi Zichen returned to the God realm, they returned to the outside and headed for the God realm. In such a short time, Yale actually knew that they were traveling together. Then there were only 2 possibilities. They'd entered the range of Yale's divine sense. Perhaps he had eyes in the Upheaval Alliance. Either of those 2 possibilities was not a good thing for Yi Zichen. The former Yi Zichen and the other's divine senses could only extend up to 1,000 meters, but Yale's could cover such a vast expanse of the primal chaos. It was clear that their spiritual power far surpassed Yi Zichen's. The latter, they had planted a spy, but they couldn't determine who it was. The enemy was in the dark, but they were out in the open. Every move the Upheaval Alliance made would be known to the outsiders, so they could defend themselves. But when the extraterritorial God race attacked the Third Era, they could catch them off guard. From this point of view, the Third Era was already at a disadvantage. Era Star Master, Devil King, our Master Yale has been waiting for a long time. Please follow us to the Destruction Shrine. The 3 emissaries spoke up once more. Yi Zichen looked at them. Their auras surged violently. Perhaps Yale had instructed them to, or perhaps they didn't want to lose face for the outsiders. From the moment they'd met, their godheads had been burning. Especially the emissary in the middle. His godhead was burning a fiery red, and his skin was a bit red. Speaking of which, it was necessary to mention the outsiders' appearances. Unlike Pilar of the demon race, not only were they not ugly, but they were also somewhat handsome. Their physiques were similar to humans, but they looked more like Westerners. Yi Zichen engraved their faces in his mind, then smiled. Don't worry. I never would have guessed Yale would send someone to welcome us. I'm truly flattered. Era Star Master, you're too serious. The man with Godhead flames on his forehead laughed. You're the Era Star Master, so you deserve this kind of treatment. Moreover, the Devil King is also here. Our Lord Yale had already asked us to wait here 6 hours ago. I still don't know your name. Qinghai, said the man with Godhead flames. His surname was Qing. Yi Zichen nodded inwardly. He'd run into quite a few people with the surname Qing recently. Inside the Yaoxiling Pagoda, Qing Lan. The ancient race's Qing Li. This time, the outsider's Qing Hai had arrived. You really are surnamed Qing? Pilar suddenly transmitted. What? What's so special about being surnamed Qing? Asked Yi Zichen. There are 3 major clans in the north. Qing in the south, Qing in the north, and Shi in the middle. Qing is the most powerful of the 3. 40% of the gods in the north have the surname Qing. Their godheads are generally fire-type, and they're born as lesser gods, said Pilar. The gods have clans too. Yi Zichen was speechless. He'd assumed the outsiders were all experts with godheads, and their population should be relatively small. He hadn't expected them to have clans too. Pilar's words meant that the outsiders had far more people than Yi Zichen had imagined. How many are there? Many. Pilar glanced at him. Many, like a swarm of locusts. Of course, there aren't as many as you humans. It's hard for gods to have children, especially angels. It might take 100 years to give birth to a baby angel. Angels! Don't ask random questions. When the time comes, I'll tell you everything I need to. Even if you find out now, it won't be good for you. When he thought about how Qing Hai and the others were waiting, he had no choice but to drop the subject. However, based on Pilar's words, Yi Zichen could sense that his understanding of the outsiders was still too shallow. There were far more things here than he'd imagined. Yi Zichen suppressed his thoughts, then smiled at Qing Hai. I didn't realize you were the young master of the Qing family. With Pilar present, Qing Hai wasn't at all surprised that Yi Zichen knew about the Qing family. Besides, when they attacked the outside realm fiends, the Qing family was the main force. There was no need to be overly courteous, so she just smiled and nodded. Epic Master, Your Excellency Demon King, can we go to the Divine Palace of Destruction now? Our Excellency Yale has been waiting for you for far too long. If we wait any longer, I'm afraid we'll be punished. Then we can't let young Master Qing suffer. Chapter 1738. Hazy. Mysterious. The 3 god race experts of Qinghai led the way. Yi Zichen followed them into the depths of the god race. This was the first time he'd ever felt anything like this. It was like facing the sea. If you sniffed the air carefully, you could even smell a faint fishy odor. Hazy mist enveloped the area. Neither the naked eye nor divine sense could see more than 100 meters into the distance. One could only vaguely see a tall building hidden in the clouds. However, when they approached the building that they had seen earlier disappeared into thin air. Coupled with the surrounding clouds and mist, it gave this place a mysterious feeling. Pilar. Go Yuzhan transmitted through his divine sense. Before entering the group, Yi Zichen had introduced himself and said that Pilar was leading the way. If they had any questions, they could ask him. As they walked, Go Yuzhan took in the sights as if he were sightseeing. Now it was finally time to ask questions. Pilar said nothing. He didn't look back. Instead, his expression was the same as ever as he followed behind Qinghai and the others. What is it? Are we in the god realm now? How is that possible? This is the breeding ground for the aura break beasts, said Pilar. Just now, you probably saw some buildings hidden in the mist. When we got close, they disappeared. Those are aura break beasts. Go Yuzhan's eyes widened in shock. The buildings he'd seen earlier were all several hundred meters tall. Although he'd seen recordings of aura break beasts before, he hadn't seen them as clearly as now. He thought back to those towering figures he'd just seen. Go Yuzhan gulped. Even the fearless Go Yuzhan was starting to panic. It wasn't for any other reason. It was just that everything he'd seen just now had been too shocking. If he'd seen those beasts, given their size, wouldn't they have been able to eat 100 of him in one bite? He inexplicably shuddered. Now that he thought about it, he shuddered. Don't worry, everyone. Although the aura break beasts can devour all living creatures and aren't exactly docile, with us 3 brothers here, they won't hurt you no matter what. Please relax and don't worry too much, said Qinghai with a friendly smile. It looked like a friendly reminder, but given their current circumstances, even an idiot could tell that he was subtly mocking them. Maybe he didn't need to come here to go to the god race. He did this just to show off his power to the people of this era, to let them know the power of the god race. Yi Zichen wasn't sure if this was Yale's idea. However, from Yi Zichen's point of view, this display of strength was perfect. He was worried that he did not have a deep understanding of the essence-breaking beast. This time, he could use this opportunity to learn more about the essence-breaking beast. Little did they know that Yale had never instructed them to do so. Qinghai wanted to show off the might of the god realm, so he'd done this on purpose. He hadn't expected to fall right into Yi Zichen's trap. If Qinghai knew about this, how would he feel? Would Yale punish him heavily when he found out? Then I'll have to trouble young Master Qing. Back in the outside, Yi Zichen had said the same thing. As soon as he finished speaking, he devoted himself to collecting information about the yuan-breaking beast. As for dealing with Qinghai and the others, he left it to Yinshang to handle. Time had passed. The god race was too hazy, so it was difficult for them to calculate time using sunlight. After entering the Protoss territory, his cell phone seemed to be disrupted by a magnetic field, and he could not keep time normally. All Yi Zichen and company knew was that they walked for a long time before finally leaving the area where the aura-breaking beasts were raised. Of course, this trip hadn't been in vain. Yi Zichen really did gather quite a bit of information about the aura-breaking beasts. There were 4 types of yuan-breaking beasts, and the most common one was the Raging Bull body. The Raging Bull physique-breaking Qi beast was about 300 zhang tall when it was young, and it was 100 zhang tall when it was fully grown. Those above 1,000 feet were generally the leaders of the beasts, and the social status here was largely related to their size. Apart from the Raging Bull body, there were 3 more ape body, amphibious body, and avian body. This meant that if the Protoss were to attack in the future, they would be able to launch an all-out attack on land, water, and air. Especially the bird body. Even though Yi Zichen hadn't actually touched it, he only scanned the edges with his divine sense. However, he could still see that the feathers on the bird's body were like sharp blades. Its sharpness and sturdiness were definitely not inferior to a divine artifact. In order to compete with them, they would have to establish an air force that was fully equipped with high-quality god artifact armor, and their cultivation level would be around that of a divine general. How lucky! If Qinghai hadn't brought him here, he would never have guessed that there were so many different types of yuan-breaking beasts. There were actually species on land, water, and air. Planet Lord of the Epoch, our divine city is right in front of us. The people living in this city are all titled gods, so please be careful, Star Lord Era. If you anger one of the gods, Qinghai won't be able to protect you. Thank you. Within a majestic palace, there was a seat at the top of a flight of stairs over 100 meters high. From this seat, one could see everything below. However, the people below couldn't see the person's face clearly due to the mist. A young man reclined on the seat. 6 maids stood behind him, either massaging his shoulders, legs, fanning him, or serving him snacks. He sat there, enjoying himself, and looked down at the people standing on either side of the palace. So slow, muttered the young man. No one else in the palace dared make a sound. Only a woman to the young man's right looked up at him with a heroic air. I have matters to take care of in the palace, so I don't have time to waste with you. The young man squinted his eyes. In the entire palace, or rather, in the entire northern god race, there was only one person who dared to speak to him like that. If anyone else spoke like that, the young man would have sent them to paradise long ago. But not this woman. He had to let her have her way. As for the reason, he liked this woman. Don't worry, you're always like this. Just let it go in the palace. If it really is too difficult, I'll find someone from the Divine Palace to help you, said the young man dotingly. There's no need for you to worry about that. The woman's expression and words were filled with endless disgust for the young man. The young man merely smiled. He was already used to all of this. No matter what, he was always on the winning side. It was only in front of this woman that he felt defeated. He really enjoyed this feeling, and was confident that he could take down this thorny rose. The young man calmed himself down and smiled. All right, then I won't interfere with your matters. But wait a bit, a few friends will be here soon. Friends? Chapter 1739. The doors opened. Thick clouds slipped into the hall through the cracks in the palace. Dim fluorescent light also shone into the palace from the outside, casting the shadows of the people outside into the hall. The 12 people in the hall all looked towards the door, including the woman. Before long, footsteps sounded out unhurriedly. Qing Hai was burning with the power of his godhead. The flames on his forehead were incomparably dazzling. He walked to the center of the hall and knelt on one knee. Your Excellency Yale, your subordinate has come to report. You've done well. Bring them here and you may leave. Qing Hai nodded solemnly, then walked out of the hall. After that, the doors opened a half-meter gap, and Yi Zichen and his party of 4 walked in. We're finally going to meet. Yi Zichen walked through the hall with his chest puffed out and his back ramrod straight. He didn't even look around as he entered. As soon as he entered, he sensed 12 auras locking onto him. They didn't seem aggressive at all. Rather, they seemed to be trying to figure out who he was. However, what caught his attention was that among these auras, there seemed to be an aura that was particularly unstable. Yi Zichen subconsciously looked in the direction of the aura and saw a graceful woman with a charming face. Furthermore, judging from the way she stood, if Yi Zichen's guess was right, her position was obviously the highest among the 12 people in the hall. Don't look around. Pilar, who was slowly following Yi Zichen, narrowed his eyes. His reaction was completely different from Yi Zichen's. What is it? Asked Yi Zichen in confusion. Pilar's lips twitched. When he looked at the people in the hall, his gaze was filled with undisguisable hatred. After he entered the hall, there were at least 11 extremely aggressive auras that came in contact with him. He knew all of these people, and he would never forget them for the rest of his life. They're the 12 overgods under the God King of Destruction, Yale. When Yi Zichen heard that, he froze. Didn't that mean these people were the enemies of Pilar's clan? No wonder Yi Zichen sensed Pilar's unstable aura as soon as he entered. His entire body radiated an undisguisable, murderous aura. However, he was more concerned about that woman. Why did she reveal such emotional fluctuations when she saw him? There was surprise, fear, and worry. It was as if this woman had known Yi Zichen for a long time, and their relationship wasn't shallow at all. However, Yi Zichen couldn't find any memories of her at all. He glanced at the woman again, and their eyes met. The woman quickly lowered her head to avoid Yi Zichen's gaze. Little did they know that this scene was completely witnessed by Yale. This woman was the target of his pursuit, so he naturally paid more attention to her than anyone else. He clearly saw the change in the woman's expression when she saw Yi Zichen. However, he didn't say anything. Instead, he retracted his gaze and looked at Yi Zichen. The instant Yale's gaze landed on him, Yi Zichen sensed his gaze. Although the thick clouds prevented him from seeing Yale clearly, he still raised his head and stared back at him, refusing to back down. They stared at each other in silence, causing the atmosphere in the hall to plummet. As they stared at each other through the clouds, it was as if sparks were flying between them. The other god lords didn't move. Yin Shang, Go Yuzhan, and Pilar stood there silently, their hands clasped behind their backs. The clouds in the hall suddenly parted, leaving a 2-meter-wide path in the middle. Only then did Yi Zichen truly see Yale's face. He was a very handsome young man. From his face, it was easy to see how calm he was. When he laughed heartily, it was easy to win people's favor. He sat in his chair, his back straight. His eyes radiated a somewhat intimidating aura, and his deep, profound gaze was the complete opposite of his appearance, mature and weathered. This was the God King of Destruction, the most brutal and warlike of the outsiders. Ha ha ha! After a long while, Yale laughed heartily from his vantage point. Yale's laughter dissipated the pressure from before. He rose to his feet, took a few steps, and landed in front of Yi Zichen. As if they were old friends, he reached out and patted Yi Zichen on the shoulder. "Star Lord of the epic era, your presence brings light to my humble abode." Yale's voice was low, but very pleasing to the ear. It was as if he were bathing in a spring breeze, and the heavy pressure in the hall lessened considerably. It was obvious that Yale was a shrewd man. He wasn't some brainless, battle-hungry fellow. Although he was an enemy, you couldn't slap a smiling face, so Yi Zichen could only smile. "I never would have guessed that the God King of Destruction from the outside would know our language. Your presence brings light to my humble abode. Using that phrase on me is truly frightening. I've always been deeply interested in the language of the Star Lord's era, so I've been researching it. However, in front of you, it's a bit like displaying one's slight skill in front of an expert. If Star Lord Yi discovers a few things I've used incorrectly, please don't hesitate to enlighten me." "No problem." Yale laughed once more, then glanced at Pilar. When enemies met, their eyes blazed with hatred. That was the perfect description for Pilar. Yale had single-handedly destroyed the demon race. To Pilar, Yale held a grudge against him that stemmed from the destruction of his entire race. An emperor couldn't endure the destruction of a country. Pilar was a glorious demon king, yet his entire race had been destroyed. No matter how shrewd he was, he couldn't restrain his anger. "Your Excellency, Demon King, we meet again." Even though Pilar's gaze was as murderous as ever, Yale's lips curved into a smile. His expression was relaxed. Or perhaps it was more accurate to say that Pilar had nothing to worry about. The demon race had been destroyed, and Pilar, the Demon King, had lost all of his demonic power. In front of Yale, Pilar was nothing more than a dancing clown. Yi Zichen couldn't be bothered to feel even the slightest bit irritated by Yi Zichen's words. On the contrary, he enjoyed this feeling. In truth, Pilar didn't know. He'd only escaped into the time corridor at Yale's behest, all for the sake of this. "Yale!" Pilar squeezed the word out through clenched teeth. Yale shook his head and sighed. "It seems Your Excellency, Demon King, is still brooding over the previous war. It's already been so long. Why can't Your Excellency, Demon King, set aside your hatred and live a peaceful life?" Chapter 1740. Generally speaking, demons weren't particularly tall. Even though Pilar was a demon king, he couldn't escape the demon race's genetic problem. He was less than 1.5 meters tall, so when he stood in front of Yale, he only came up to his chest. Yale's chest was practically touching Pilar's nose. He looked down from above, his eyes filled with mockery and disdain. When he heard this, Yi Zichen's brows instantly furrowed. Go Yuzhan and Yin Shang were secretly trying to connect with the Nirvana stars and use their power. Yale's words were merciless. Anyone could sense that the tension was already at its peak, but… Ha ha ha! Just a second ago, Yale's expression had been one of unbridled arrogance, but now he burst into laughter. He reached out and patted Pilar on the shoulder, his gaze gentle. "Did you think I'd say that?" As he spoke, Yale glanced at Yi Zichen and smiled. "You're right. The demons and gods have bordered each other for billions of years. Although there's constant friction between us, we're both superior races. At our level, you should know that our clansmen's lifespans have long since reached the point where they'll perish with the world. For our clansmen to multiply, we need more resources, as well as more land. For this, the demons and gods go to war every million years. I'm sure you know this, Pilar. It's all for the sake of effectively reducing the number of clansmen." Pilar said nothing, but he didn't refute. It seemed he silently agreed with Yale's words. In truth, Yi Zichen could understand. Never mind the demons and gods, even the upper 3 realms' population had reached a saturation point. In order to prevent population growth, the upper 3 realms would also engage in a 3-way war. However, this war existed purely for the sake of reducing clansmen. Once the numbers reached a certain point, all three sides would tacitly withdraw their troop. If the demons and gods had done the same, the demons wouldn't have been wiped out in the first place. I feel guilty towards the demons. At that moment, Yale's mood sank and his tone grew somber. Pilar, you know better than anyone that we planned this war. Our original intention was to reduce the number of clansmen on both sides. But when we retreated, you stabbed us in the back, Pilar said through gritted teeth. The evil demon race and the god race were superior races. Without any natural enemies, the birth of their clansmen was completely unrestricted. The problem of the two races' population had always been the most troubling problem for the two races. The restrictions of the rules prevented them from declaring war on the lower races and plundering their land. They were the only two superior races, so if they wanted to reduce their numbers, they would have to declare war. This was what they had been doing all this time, and nothing had happened. However, the previous war, which was also a war to reduce the number of clansmen, had caused the destruction of Pilar's demon race. Why it was Yale and the others who did not keep their promises. When the Fiend clan was preparing to withdraw from the extraterritorial battlefield, the four great divine kings of the extraterritorial divine race launched a sneak attack on them, causing them to lose all of their fiend power. The fiend clansmen who came to participate in the battle were already covered in wounds. Facing the elites of the divine clan, they were slaughtered in less than half a month. After that, the divine clan wantonly attacked the fiend clan and slaughtered the entire fiend clan. The 6 great guardians under Pilar had sacrificed their lives to send him to the time corridor. From then on, the Fiend clan no longer existed. How could Pilar not be angry at such a treacherous act? The one who had instigated this war was Yale. Naturally, Pilar thought that he was the one who planned it. Demon King, I can only say sorry to you here. Suddenly, Yale's face darkened. He took a few steps back and deeply bowed to Pilar. This bow made the 12 main gods sitting in the hall widen their eyes. They were Yale's trusted followers, so they knew what kind of person he was. The Yale in front of them had not even bowed to the God Emperor. My original intention was really to reduce the number of clansmen on both sides. I never thought of invading the Fiend clan's territory. As for why this happened, I can only say that I'm just a chess piece on the chessboard. People in the game have no choice. At this time, Yale's eyes were filled with sincere apology. Pilar looked at him deeply. Not long after, his eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. You mean, it seems that the Demon King has already guessed it. Yale nodded with a calm face. Although my title is Destruction, I'm not a tyrannical person. Actually, I had good intentions in facilitating this war. I wanted to reduce the number of clansmen on both sides. However, I'm not the one with the highest position in the God clan. I can't say who this person is, but I believe that the Demon King can guess who he is. So, I've wronged you. Despite Yale's answer, Pilar still snorted angrily, his nose brimming with cold air. I wouldn't dare. Yale shook his head. The destruction of the Fiend clan is a fact. I was the one who instigated this war. This is also a fact. The destruction of the Fiend clan, as the Demon King, you're naturally furious. In fact, I really wanted to do what I did in the beginning. I wanted to mock and ridicule you to the end and take everything on myself. Yes, since you think that it was my plan, I might as well go all the way. It's just that I can't do it. I have no way to treat someone who trusts me and trusts me with his back without any scruples. You trusted me, so I did it. But in the end, I failed to live up to your trust. With that, Yale shook his head and laughed at himself. Whether you believe it or not, when the higher-ups decided to act against the Fiend clan, I voted against it. Unfortunately, I was weak. My vote against it couldn't reverse the trend. In the end, it was my fault. If I hadn't contacted you to facilitate this war, this wouldn't have happened. In the end, it was my fault. Yale's emotions were very clear. The self-mockery in his words and expression made it impossible to find any flaws. This display of emotion made the hostility in Pilar's eyes lessen. However, he wasn't completely moved by Yale's words. No matter what, the hatred of the extermination of the Fiend clan was absolutely irreconcilable. If Yale could resolve this enmity with just a few words, would Pilar still be considered a demon king? Chapter 1741. No one would have guessed the meeting would end like this. Yale's 12 overgods had all left. During this time, Yi Zichen glanced at the female overgod a few more times. Unfortunately, after leaving the divine palace, she hadn't met his gaze again. Even before the other overgods left, she'd left in a hurry. Hazy clouds obscured their vision. Buildings rose and fell like mirages. Yi Zichen knew that they were actually the Outerium god race's aura-shattering beasts. The god king of destruction led the way, while Yi Zichen and the others followed. On the way, no matter how much Pilar and Yi Zichen whispered to each other, he didn't so much as glance behind him. The materials here are terrifyingly hard. Yi Zichen held a handful of sand in his hand and frowned. He'd randomly picked up stones and crushed them into powder. It hadn't been easy for them to come to the outside. This might be their only chance to do so before clashing with the Outerium gods. In that case, Yi Zichen naturally had to seize this opportunity to gather as much information on the Outerium god race as possible. Yi Zichen examined the hardness of the stones, and used them to determine how strong the Outerium god race's weapons were. Yi Zichen crushed the stones with his bare hands, but the stones here were far harder than those of the god, Yao, and demon realms. They were practically as hard as ordinary artifact forging materials. Going by that logic, the Outerium god race's weapons were far stronger than the god, Yao, and demon realms. That's only natural. The spatial density of the Outerium god race is much higher than that of the lower races. Their raw materials are naturally much higher as well. Pilar glanced around discreetly. Do you see those buildings? Yi Zichen nodded in response, even though they were heading towards the back of the divine palace. However, they still saw quite a few towering buildings around them. No more, no less. There were 12 of them in total. Those are the residences of Yale's 12 overgods. The materials used to build them are 100 times harder than the stones you just used. 100 times. Yi Zichen's foot suddenly froze. After a long while, he landed back on the ground, but his gaze never left the buildings. What do you think? The forging techniques of the god race aren't inferior to yours, they might even be stronger than yours. Don't you know how to purify your forging materials? Every single piece of stone in the buildings of those sovereigns has been hammered hundreds of times, compressing and discarding the impurities within them. These are just my conservative estimate. Pilar was right. The gods, Yao, and demons would also purify their materials when forging. It was not difficult to purify a material by 100 times. However, if the outsiders could do it as well, that wasn't good news for Yi Zichen. He was not worried about how to break through these buildings. The Third Era's main task was to defend against the god race's attack. As for attacking them, that would require further planning. But from this, it could be seen that the equipment of the Outer Realm Protoss was not on the same level as that of the Third Era. In terms of cultivation, Qinghai, who'd come to fetch Yi Zichen and Yi Zichen, was in the middle of the god realm. However, he was also an emperor, and he had the power of a godhead. Yin Shang, if you were to face Qinghai or those sovereigns, how confident would you be? When Yin Shang heard this, he frowned deeply. It was obvious that he was calculating his chances of victory. If I were to face Qinghai and the others, I have a 70% chance of victory. As for the sovereigns, they haven't revealed their true strength. They only revealed a bit of their aura when we entered. I dare not be arrogant, but my chances against them are less than 30%. Against Yuzhan, though, I should be able to raise it to around 60%. This surprised Yi Zichen somewhat. Although Go Yuzhan was one of the 4 stars, due to his frivolous nature, he was always accompanied by the steady Yin Shang. People couldn't help but overlook him. Yi Zichen hadn't expected Yin Shang to have such a high opinion of Go Yuzhan. Emperor Star, although Yuzhan and I are both 4 stars, I'm the minister of the left, while he's the minister of the right. The minister of the right is in charge of external affairs, while the minister of the left is in charge of internal affairs. I might be better at scheming, but in terms of martial prowess, the minister of the right is far superior to me when it comes to connecting with the stars and activating their power, transmitted Yin Shang through his divine sense. Then he turned to Go Yuzhan. Yuzhan, what do you think? Yi Zichen looked over, hoping to hear a reassuring answer from Go Yuzhan. Unexpectedly, Go Yuzhan furrowed his brows and shook his hands under his sleeves. Then, he spoke with a dark expression. Less than 60%. I can take care of Qinghai and the others without using the power of the stars. Against those over-gods, my chances of winning are around 50% within 100 moves. After that, my chances are only 40%. Don't underestimate that woman. She looks weak and soft, but she's the strongest of them all. She's not much weaker than the God King of Destruction, Yale. If she fights me, then I only have a 10% chance of winning. If Big Sister Lu is here, then her chances might be higher than mine. However, since we've come here, it means that Big Sister Lu has been captured. With my uncle and Big Sister Lu here, why don't we just surrender? Go Yuzhan suddenly changed the topic. Yi Zichen raised his hand and slapped Go Yuzhan's head. What? Do you have any shame? Yi Zichen roared angrily through his divine sense. We haven't even started fighting, yet you're already telling us that you're Song Jiang's descendant, right? Hey, don't say it. A fortune teller really did say that I'm Song Jiang's reincarnation. F***ck off. With Go Yuzhan's interruption, the heavy atmosphere lightened somewhat. However, amidst this relief, there was an even heavier reality. The strength of the god race was much stronger than he had imagined. Flying beasts were already troublesome enough. Not even Yin Shang and Go Yuzhan were confident they could defeat the 12 overgods. After all, after activating the power of the stars, they could be considered the cream of the crop of the gods, Yao and demon realms. Their equipment and cultivation levels weren't as high as their opponents, but in terms of numbers, they weren't that much inferior to the gods, Yao and demons. In fact, they might even have more. What's the point of fighting? Yi Zichen couldn't help but shout in his sea of consciousness. At that moment, someone viciously smacked him on the back of the head. He looked back and saw Go Yuzhan's hand, which he'd yet to retract in time. Wake up! We haven't even started fighting and you're already so scared? You're the reincarnation of Song Jiang. You're the hope of our entire village. Wake up! What are you afraid of? At worst, we'll just die. We've lived for so long. Even in the modern realm, we'd be considered old, all right? Go Yuzhan cursed. Yi Zichen glanced at him, then laughed. Chapter 1744. Exquisite wine, jade dew, rare delicacies. The cool, white jade table was surrounded by the unique mist of the god race. It was like standing in a heavenly palace. Yale, Pilar, and Yale chatted merrily, toasting each other. From time to time, they gazed at the beautiful scenery, as if they were close friends. After 3 rounds of wine, Yale gently placed the wine cup on the white jade table. When the bottom of the wine cup, which was also made of white jade, touched the surface of the table, it made a crisp sound. Yi Zichen and Pilar, who'd been distracted to begin with, put down their glasses, only to see Yale raise his glass high into the air and toast to Pilar. Demon King, this is a toast to you. Pilar raised his cup in response. Yale also opened his mouth at this moment. I know you're broad-minded and don't want to bring up the matter of your clan's extermination. It's just that you trusted me so much, yet you ended up like this. I really can't get over it. Take this cup of wine as my apology. I hope you'll do me the honor. If you really feel bad, why don't you cripple your own divine power and join me? Yale's face froze. Pilar looked into Yale's eyes. Before long, their eyes met and they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Their laughter puzzled the nearby attendants, but they quickly retracted their grins. The Demon King likes to joke, as always. We can't let the atmosphere we've worked so hard to heat up die down just because of your words, can we? Pilar glanced at the wine in his cup, then poured it into a nearby pond. As soon as the nectar fell into the pond, it attracted groups of fish to crazily fight for the nectar in the pond. The water in the pool continued to churn, and Pilar placed the cup on the table at the same time. I won't drink this wine. If I did, I'd be letting down my clansmen. The God King of Destruction doesn't need to worry about me. No matter who I was before, I'm now a cripple. That's true. I wasn't thinking things through. In that case, I won't drink. The wine glass was placed on the table. Just as Yale sat up straight, a waiter brought him a pure white handkerchief. He gave the waiter a meaningful look, and the waiter brought them both a piece of cake. Star-Lord Yi, I've always had a question in my heart. Feel free to speak your mind. The handkerchief was casually thrown to the ground by Yale, and the waiter beside him immediately rushed over and bent over to pick it up. When Yi Zichen saw this, he squinted his eyes. Yale smiled. Don't worry. You seem to be an old acquaintance of mine, the War Goddess? War Goddess? Yi Zichen arched his brows, confusion flashing through his eyes. This was Yi Zichen's first visit to the God realm. He'd never even heard of the War Goddess, so how could he possibly know her? It wasn't like he hadn't heard of it before. There was a goddess of war in Greek mythology, but that was just a myth. How could he know her? I wonder who the godly King of Destruction is referring to? Don't tell me you don't know her? She's the only female chief god in my divine palace. She's my subordinate, the War Goddess. Earlier, I saw Star-Lord Yi exchange glances with her, and the way they looked at each other definitely didn't feel like they didn't know each other. Could it be that I was mistaken? Said Yale. You mean? Yi Zichen understood. He remembered that female chief god. It was just as Yale said. They'd exchanged glances since entering the divine palace. The main reason was that the female chief god looked at him strangely. Unfortunately, he had no impression of her at all. He'd only glanced at her a few times. He hadn't expected Yale to notice even that. Either he cared a lot about Yi Zichen, or he cared a lot about that female chief god. I don't know her. This is my first time meeting the War Goddess. Perhaps it's because she looks rather familiar, so I couldn't help but take a few more glances. Intimate, huh? Star-Lord Yi is indeed extraordinary. Yale laughed loudly. What? Ever since the War Goddess returned to the God realm, she's treated everyone with cold indifference. Even I'm an outsider, yet Star-Lord Yi says she's familiar? How could she be ordinary? Maybe I sensed wrongly. Yi Zichen shook his head and smiled, then looked at Yale. It seems the God King of Destruction cares a lot about that female chief god. To tell you the truth, she's my sweetheart. Yale didn't try to hide it. In truth, everyone in the God Palace of Destruction knew about his feelings for the War Goddess. The attendants didn't find it strange, and their expressions remained the same. Yi Zichen smiled in understanding, hurriedly picked up his cup, and filled it to the brim. I never would have guessed it was the God King of Destruction's sweetheart. I lost my composure, so I'll punish myself with a cup. I hope you won't take offense. Yi Zichen ignored Yale's raised hand and drained his cup in one gulp. When he saw that his cup was empty, Yale could only lower his hand and shake his head helplessly with a sigh. However, at that moment, he sensed a deep, fierce gaze directed at him like a sharp sword. He looked ahead and saw Yi Zichen squinting at him, his cheeks rosy. Star-Lord Yi? God King of Destruction. Yi Zichen's gaze was sincere as he looked at the God King of Destruction. We've come and we've drunk. You should know why we're here. Isn't it about time you fulfilled your promise? Yale froze. He stared at Yi Zichen for a long time, then smiled meaningfully. Star-Lord Ye's promise, Will the God King of Destruction release Xiao Yumei and the others and my brothers? Unbeknownst to them, A servant girl was intentionally eavesdropping on their conversation some distance away from the banquet table. Will the God King of Destruction release Xiao Yumei and the others and my brothers? Although she was far away, Yi Zichen's question reached the servant girl's ears without missing a single word. Xiao Yumei? Why does that name sound so familiar? Suddenly, the servant girl's eyes widened. Her shocked expression caused the other attendants to look in her direction. When she sensed everyone's attention, the servant girl hurriedly feigned pain. I'm feeling a bit unwell, so I'll leave things here to you. I want to go back and rest. His Excellency the God King, No, I really can't take it anymore. Even if I stay here, it'll be hard for me to serve the God King and his esteemed guests. In order to convince the others, the servant girl secretly circulated her divine power in reverse. Chapter 1745. The attendants of the palace all knew Yale's temperament. In order to prevent the maid from being punished, the other attendants carefully covered for her and allowed her to leave through the back door. After confirming that the maidservant had left safely, the attendants continued with their work in an orderly manner. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Outside the Northern God Clan's God of Destruction palace, a blur nimbly traversed through the clouds. To be able to maintain such speed in such a dense fog, it was clear that this person had long since known the surroundings of the God of Destruction palace. Xiao Yumei, if I remember correctly, Big Sister has always been muttering this name, the blur said in a low voice. A whisper could be heard from the afterimage. The person shuttling through the clouds was none other than Lin Yuan's maidservant. Although the maid was very anxious, she kept an eye on her surroundings as she traversed through the street. After a few twists and turns, she circled around a building more than 10 times before she found a secret door and went in. Behind the door was a plainly decorated boudoir. There was a woman pacing back and forth in the room. Her eyes flickered with panic, and she clenched her fists tightly. She bit her lips so hard that a row of teeth marks appeared. Big Sister! Why did you come back? If Yale discovers you again, even if I accept you as my adopted sister, I won't be able to save you. A fierce expression flashed across the woman's face. She was none other than the War Goddess, one of the 12 master gods under Yale. Although the maid was indeed one of her people, Yale had discovered her once. Fortunately, she had taken her in as her sworn sister, and Yale had spared the maid's life for her sake. Now that the maid had secretly returned to her god's residence, if Yale discovered her, the problem would be severe. Although she reprimanded her, the War Goddess's concern for the maid was real. When she saw the maid's pale face, she hurriedly stretched out her hand to check her meridians. Why is the divine power in your body so chaotic? Who bullied you? Big Sister, don't worry about me. I did it myself. The maidservant pulled on the War Goddess's hand. When the War Goddess saw her anxious expression, she frowned. The maidservant said, Big Sister, do you know someone called Xiao Yumei? Who is she? What's there to hide between you and me? Just now, when I was serving the God King of Destruction, that Star Lord from the 3rd epoch mentioned this name. Him? What did he say? The God King of Destruction should have captured Xiao Yumei and many others. They are here to ask for them. The cloud and smoke dispersed in an instant. A speck of white light floated in the air. The dim light made the garden slightly brighter. Yi Zichen and the others had come here for Xiao Yumei and the others, but the God King of Destruction still hadn't mentioned it. This made Yi Zichen rather anxious. The God King of Destruction smiled when he heard this. This smile was very strange, and no one could tell what he was thinking. Then he placed his fingers on the white jade table and began to knock on it, causing the already anxious Yi Zichen's emotions to fluctuate even more intensely. Godly King of Destruction, it can't be that you don't want to release him, right? As he spoke, Yi Zichen's expression completely darkened. His solemn expression was so dark that it seemed like it could drip water at any moment. If the God King of Destruction had gone back on his word, then the letter was a trap. Yi Zichen accepted it. For the sake of Xiao Yumei and the others' safety, he was willing to put himself in danger. At worst, it would just be a life-and-death struggle. Whoosh! A staff appeared out of thin air in Go Yuzhan's hands. As it streaked through the air, it whistled through the air. The attendants in the garden hurriedly took a few steps back. At the same time, several people appeared by Yale's side and glared fiercely at Yi Zichen and the others. It seems Your Excellency, the God King, is really going back on his word. Yi Zichen, who'd never held out hope, smiled coolly. The people behind Yale were the best proof of that. If Yale had truly wanted to invite them to a banquet, he would have let Xiao Yumei and the others go after the banquet. Then, as soon as Go Yuzhan took out his weapon, his subordinates, who'd left long ago, wouldn't have appeared behind him. This was all premeditated. Right now, he didn't care about his own survival. When he decided to come to the God Realm, he'd prepared for the worst. However, Yin Shang and Go Yuzhan originally had nothing to do with them, yet they'd been dragged into this mess. Earlier, Go Yuzhan had said that even he wasn't completely confident in facing off against these overgods. What's more, 11 overgods had appeared behind Yale. The only one missing was the goddess of war. Master of the stars, it seems they're ready to attack. In a moment, Yuzhan and I will burn our starlight. Although we might not be their match, we can delay them for a while. Take advantage of the chaos to escape. Yin Shang's divine sense transmission appeared in Yi Zichen's sea of consciousness. Yi Zichen looked at him. By now, Yin Shang's eyes were filled with the power of the stars. Amidst their dazzling brilliance, Yi Zichen could even see a wisp of fire. It seemed he was ready to burn his starlight to buy Yi Zichen time to retreat. God King of Destruction! Stand down! After a long silence, Yale turned to the overgods behind him and roared angrily. Master, these people want to hurt you. What a joke! The Epic Star Lord and the Fiend King are my honored guests, and they were invited here. If the Fiend King wants to attack me, I can understand. But I have no enmity with Celestial Lord Ji Yuan. Why would Celestial Lord Ji Yuan want to kill me? Yale barked harshly, and the 11 sovereigns behind him all lowered their eyes and took 2 steps back. At that moment, Yale turned around and cupped his fists towards Yi Zichen apologetically. Planet Lord Epic, I have offended you. My subordinates are too insensible and have startled you. I will punish myself with a cup of wine. Without waiting for an explanation, Yale filled his cup and downed it in one gulp. The wine cup was placed on the table with a clink. Yale even used his hand to wipe the corners of his mouth in a forthright manner. I understand that Star Lord Epic came here for the sake of a beauty. However, this seat has been friends with Star Lord Yi for a long time, which is why I wanted to drink a few more cups. Who knew that Star Lord would be so impatient? It seems that Star Lord does not trust this seat. Yi Zichen did not reply. Yale let out a long sigh. Never mind. Since Star Lord Yi doesn't want to drink with me, then I won't force you. Being able to witness the Star Lord's glory today can be considered fulfilling my wish. How about this, the pain? This subordinate is here. Go and invite the guests of the Third Era over. Tell them to return with Star Lord Yi. Understood. Chapter 1747. Meeting Friends Through Martial Arts. As soon as Yale said this, the 10 overgods behind him raised their heads proudly. Although they hadn't released their godhead's power, everyone in the garden could feel the pressure around them increase. What on earth is this guy trying to do? Yi Zichen didn't respond directly. Instead, he pondered his intentions. Before long, however, Yi Zichen understood. This was Yale's overt scheme. The letter clearly stated that Yale wouldn't do anything to Yi Zichen and the others if they came here. In other words, there was no such thing as a feast at Hongmen. At their level, oaths were bound to be taken seriously. Yi Zichen wouldn't break the letter or set up an ambush for them, but that didn't mean he couldn't do it in other ways. For example, this friendly competition. Yale had agreed to release Xiao Yumei and the others, and he'd even sent his subordinates to fetch them. However, Yi Zichen and the others didn't know where they were being held, and how long they'd take was up to Yale. Yale and the others could buy time and heavily injure Yin Shang and the others. It was true that sparring should be stopped when the time was right, but if they really were injured, they couldn't blame them. If they were injured, Yi Zichen and the others naturally couldn't bring them back to the Third Era. Staying here to recuperate was no different from being locked up. From the start, Yale had smiled at them. He'd never considered himself a god king of destruction. He'd treated them like a host. Now, Yale had agreed to release Xiao Yumei and the others. His only request was that they meet friends through martial arts and exchange pointers. If Yi Zichen refused, he'd be giving him no face. What an overt scheme! Yi Zichen's expression didn't change, but inwardly, he marveled at Yale's ruthlessness. Star-Lord Yi, what do you think? When he saw that Yi Zichen still hadn't responded, Yale asked again, then laughed, Don't worry. Star-Lord Yi, there's no need to worry. My subordinates have all experienced hundreds of thousands of battles. We're just sparring, so we'll stop when the time is right. They know how to control their strength, and there's no way they'll hurt your two heroes. What a joke! Whoosh! Go Yuzhan, who had long since prepared himself for battle, swept his staff fiercely, and a violent gust of wind caused the wine cups on the table to sway. The surrounding green plants also bent under the pressure of the strong wind, and the starlight in his eyes burned. His entire body was releasing a sharp aura. They even injured us. If we really fight, I think you should be more worried about your subordinates. I'm not as good at fighting as your subordinates. The number of battles I've experienced over the years can be counted on two hands, and my control of strength isn't as good as your subordinate. I wonder if the godly king of destruction has won. If the other sovereign candidates are crippled by me during the spar, you have to find a substitute to replace them. Such a merciless shout caused the faces of the 10 sovereigns behind Yale to freeze. However, no one on Yi Zichen's side spoke up to stop Go Yuzhan. Not even Yin Shang, the most rational of them all, spoke up. An enemy was an enemy. No matter how Yale treated them, the Third Era and the Outer Realm God race were enemies. Just now, it seemed like Yale was trying to comfort Yi Zichen, but in reality, he was slandering Yi Zichen's subordinates and saying they were inferior to his sovereigns. This was an insult to Yi Zichen's dignity. How could he tolerate such behavior? Insolence. One of the sovereigns couldn't help but curse. Go Yuzhan looked at him disdainfully and didn't so much as glance at him. This infuriated the sovereigns, but without Yale's orders, no matter how angry they were, they couldn't act rashly. Star-Lord Ye's subordinates sure are impressive, laughed Yale. It's not that we're impressive, it's that you, Lord Yale, are too arrogant. Yin Shang narrowed his eyes and laughed. When Yale heard that, his expression grew unsightly. He could lower himself to be on equal footing with Yi Zichen. However, it was Yi Zichen's subordinates who'd spoken, and their words were filled with disrespect. Yale's brows furrowed with fury. However, in the Outer Realm, where the God race fought and schemed against each other, for Yale to become the God King of Destruction, he was naturally more shrewd than most people. In an instant, he retracted his anger and looked at Yi Zichen. Star-Lord Yi. I'm truly sorry, said Yi Zichen. They're my auxiliary stars, so I was too arrogant and spoiled. If I said something that displeased the God King, I hope you won't take it to heart. Humph, no matter, snorted Yale, then his gaze shifted. I just wonder, Star-Lord Yi. Isn't it just making friends through martial arts? I love making friends through martial arts. Before Yale could finish his sentence, Go Yuzhan interrupted him with a cold snort. He swung his staff, blazing with starlight, and took a step forward. Then he turned to Yi Zichen and said, Star-Lord, Minister of the Right requests permission to fight. Go on, said Yi Zichen. Go on, but don't go too hard on them. We're guests. If you injure one of the sovereigns here, it'll be hard to explain. Let's see if they're strong enough. With that, Go Yuzhan pointed his staff at the 10 sovereigns behind Yale. Who dares to fight? He, Star Lord Yi and this auxiliary star of yours are truly vicious. Yale maintained the smile on his face, but the resentment in his heart flickered vaguely in his eyes. Rhythm, go and try it out with this hero. Remember to be careful. Don't get hurt. The other side has already said it. If you get hurt, it'll be my loss of face. Don't worry, God King. I won't let you down. As they spoke, a skinny young man in brown robes walked out from the 10 God Kings. The youth's eyes were as clear as the sea. When you looked into them, you couldn't help but sink into them. You'd be at peace. However, the instant he stepped forward, boom! Divine power surged out like a tidal wave, and a godhead emerged from between his brows. The divine power transformed into threads that formed a guqin above his head. His hair danced wildly in the wind, and his clear eyes instantly turned crimson. His entire person was releasing a tyrannical aura from the inside out. This violent aura was a strong contrast to his previous tranquility. Chapter 1748. Sister, they're about to make a move. Above the void of the divine palace, the war goddess lightly stepped on the void and carefully hid herself and her maidservant in the clouds. She came here after receiving news of Xiaoyume. They arrived just as Go Yuzhan and God King of Destruction Yale were making their threats. It seems like Yale has been wary of me. The war goddess furrowed her brows and muttered softly. Right now, all of Yale's deity kings were present except for her, the war goddess. Yale's intentions were clear. Do you know where Xiaoyume is being held? The servant looked troubled. She was just a servant and had only heard about Xiaoyume by chance. She had only found out about Xiaoyume by chance. As for where she was being held, even the war goddess didn't know, so how could a maid know? When she asked this, the war goddess knew that she had asked in vain. However, she couldn't release her god power now. She was only one step away from becoming a god king, but the difference between a god king and a god king was huge. Moreover, Yale had been a famous god king for a long time and was a peak existence even amongst god kings. Normal god kings couldn't hide from him. If the war goddess dared to release her god power, she would definitely be discovered. Suddenly, the war goddess noticed that one of the 11 god kings under Yale was missing. Why isn't the god of pain here? Sister, I'll go ask for you, the servant replied. The maidservant replied. Then, a communication device unique to the god race appeared in her hand. In less than 100 breaths, the servant took it back. The god of pain went to pick up Xiaoyume and the others. They're heading north of the divine palace. You're basking in my glory. The maid knew that the war goddess was confused. With her status, it was impossible for her to have any intelligence network. She explained, when the other servants found out that you accepted me as your sworn sister, many of them became friends with me. However, there were also many who did not want to serve the King of God. Thinking about working for you, they became even more friendly with me. I just asked the servants who wanted to come to you, and they told me. North of the divine palace. The war goddess muttered to herself. The layout of the divine palace appeared in her mind as she searched for a place where Xiaoyume and the others could be held. Lover's Bend. Suddenly, the goddess of war's expression froze. The maidservant beside her was stunned as well. She naturally knew about the Gulf of the Fallen Phoenix, or perhaps it could be said that as long as it was someone from the Outterium God clan, they would know about it. Tens of thousands of years ago, the original name of Lover's Cove was Fallen Phoenix Bend. The most important part of this place was its bay. The Bay of the Fallen Phoenix, which was north of the Shrine of Destruction, had a total of 99 winding roads. It was said in ancient times that the last divine beast, the Phoenix, was buried here. The bow of the fallen Phoenix came from this place. The Phoenix of the Outer Realms celestial race symbolized love. Many Outer Realms celestial race couples would come because of its fame and go through 99 detours. But the Bend of the Fallen Phoenix was still the Bend of the Fallen Phoenix, until it was because of the earth-shattering love story of the Northern God Clan's Qing family's beloved daughter that it was renamed Lover's Bend. However, the love of the proud daughter of the Qing clan wasn't recognized by the God Clans. She was expelled from the Qing clan, and there was no place for her in the God Clans. The Qing family was also punished, and due to some twists and turns in the process, it was reduced from the number 1 family of the Outer Realm God race to a second-rate family. As for Lover's Bend, it was designated a forbidden area. No one was allowed to take even half a step inside. The maid was shocked that the war goddess had mentioned Lover's Bend. After all, the God Emperor had ordered Lover's Bend to be sealed. By hiding people there, the God King of Destruction was breaking the God Emperor's rules. Big sister. He's definitely there. There's no way the North God Clan can hide this place. Of all places, the pain is to the north of the Shrine of Destruction. Then you stay here. I'll go there myself. Big sister, that's the forbidden area the God Emperor mentioned. If the God Emperor finds out I can't worry about that. Then the people down there. I trust Yi Zichen will naturally have a way to deal with this. If he can't even deal with this, then I'd have wasted all that effort. Halfway through her sentence, the war goddess suddenly cut herself off. The maid looked at her in confusion, only to see that her face was bright red. Big sister? All right, stay here and don't move around, and don't recklessly release your divine power. I'm going to Lover's Bend. If there's any news, let me know immediately. However, before she could take more than a few steps, boom. In truth, Go Yuzhan's trash talk was Yin Shang's strategy. If Yale kept calm, Yi Zichen's subordinates would have a hard time breaking out of the encirclement. Only by provoking him verbally would they lose their rationality. That way, Yi Zichen and the others would have a better chance of victory. Unfortunately, Go Yuzhan's trash talk was indeed directed at Yale, and every word he uttered was devastating. Yet, Yale remained calm and collected the entire time. On the other hand, his subordinates' eyes were bloodshot with fury. What shameless boasting! The dispatched overgod gripped his daggers, his shoulders trembling uncontrollably. Go Yuzhan seemed to be staring intently at the overgod, but he was actually looking at Yale out of the corner of his eye. His divine sense was frantically communicating with Yin Shang and Yi Zichen. Yin Shang, are you messing with me? I can't beat this overgod. Calm down, said Yin Shang. Yin Shang said, even if you didn't enrage Yale, it's still a good thing for you to have enraged his subordinate. Bullshit. Vulgar. Yin Shang said unhurriedly. The angrier he gets, the more openings he'll make. Naturally, that's a good thing for you. Or do you want him to fight you calmly? I don't want to fight him. Yin Shang was silent for a while. Then there's nothing we can do. Now that things have gotten to this point, all we can do is kill Great General Go. Hurry up and get the hell out of my sight. No wonder martial arts didn't follow literature in ancient times. You people who meddle in internal affairs are a scourge to us generals. Go Yuzhan cursed loudly, but his curses were directly blocked by Yin Shang. Yale's calmer than I thought. Isn't that inevitable? No matter what, he's the God King of his generation. If a little trick like this enraged him, I'd really have to re-evaluate the God King who destroyed the demon race, said Yi Zichen, frowning. The situation is clearly heading in a bad direction. We have to think about how to deal with the demon race. If we want to escape. Where's Wen Xiu? Didn't he come to the outside as well? Go Yuzhan shouted angrily through divine sense transmission. We've been in the outside for so long, but we haven't seen him at all. This guy is seriously. Before he'd even finished speaking, boom. A loud noise suddenly rang out in the sky above the Northern God Clan. Everyone in the forest garden, including Yale, looked towards the north. Chapter 1750. Enemy Attack. Go Yuzhan, who was wielding his staff, was so excited that he almost cried. It had come just in time. If it had been just a little later, he might have had to fight with this chief god. Although he had fused with the power of the stars, his realm had changed drastically from before. But he had too little combat experience. His single method of attack had become his biggest weakness. If he had completely fused with the memories of the previous Starlord, he wouldn't have been so afraid. But, forget it, there was nothing much to say. In the end, it was all because he was too lazy. If he had been more diligent in the past and comprehended half of the previous Starlord's moves, he could have beaten that chief god to a pulp. Goyujan swore that when he returned to Chaos City, he would fuse with the memories of the previous Starlord. As for this duel, since someone was attacking the Outer Realm Protoss, the duel probably wouldn't continue. As expected, when the words "enemy attack" rang out in the garden, Yale's gaze darkened. The chief gods under him, including the chief god who was about to fight Goyujan, all looked in Yale's direction. Master, some were waiting for Yale's orders, while a few chief gods were already flying in the direction of the rumbling. Who dares to be so presumptuous in front of the Protoss? Whoosh! Before he could finish, a cold wind started blowing in the northern lands of the Divine Palace. The biting cold wind was like a wailing ghost, howling. In an instant, the surroundings of the Divine Palace had turned into a world of ice and snow. The chief gods' godheads in the air were burning, resisting the cold and wind. But the ordinary Outer Realm Protoss warriors with low realms weren't so lucky. They looked to the north of the Divine Palace and saw frozen sculptures of all kinds. "Hey, eat my demon-subduing staff!" Suddenly, a sharp sneer appeared in the howling snow and ice. Countless golden afterimages appeared in the world of ice and snow. The staff fell to the ground, and countless ice sculptures turned to dust. Dazzling ice crystals scattered on the ground, blending with the world of ice and snow. As for the gods sealed in ice, not a single godhead was left. "Damn monkey, can't you leave some for me? You were the one who couldn't get the kill and now you're blaming me? Why don't you try to steal from me if you dare? I, old son, won't be able to steal a kill. Alright, monkey, you're good. Remember what you said." Boom, 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 gold and darkness mixed together, causing this snowy land to become especially strange. Everyone could only see streaks of golden light and pitch-black shadows shuttling through the ice and snow. They were like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, harvesting the lives of the gods who were sealed in ice. "It's Big Sis Lure." Goyujan's eyes widened as he transmitted his divine sense. As far as he could remember, the only one who could use the power of ice and snow to such an extent was the queen of the Nine-Tailed Fox clan. She was also one of the 4 great auxiliary stars, the martial song planets Su-Lu. There was no need for him to say it. Yi Zichen and Yin Shang both understood. If it was ice and snow, perhaps other races also had people who used ice and snow, but the conversation that came from the ice and snow just now, clearly, it was Yang Jian and the Great Sage. Not only that, but everyone's vision was filled with ice and snow. They might even be able to see some golden light and dark shadows, but if they looked closely, they would see a green light of recovery under this brilliance. Recovery naturally represented life. Of course, only Su Yen could use the power of life. From the looks of it, the Great Sage and the others had to be the ones breaking out of the Divine Palace. "Master, it's the aura of the Godhead of life." Yale's overgod focused his gaze. As soon as he finished speaking, someone else chimed in. "They're coming from the north. If there's nothing unexpected." Yi Zichen's eyes flashed with joy that the Great Sage and the others were safe. Suddenly, he sensed several gazes fixed on him. If there was nothing unexpected, these gazes belonged to Yale and the others. Heavenly lightning. 10,000 caddies. Right around Yale and the sovereigns beneath him, multiple bolts of purplish-red lightning suddenly descended. The lightning came so suddenly that the overgods had no choice but to focus on it. Yi Zichen took advantage of this opportunity to grab Pilar's arm. "Let's go." Yi Zichen and Pilar led the way. Goyujan didn't waste any time. He swung his staff at the rhythm over God's shoulder, then followed Yi Zichen and the others to meet up with the great sage and the others. However, as they retreated, they saw Yin Shang standing in place. He was still forming hand seals and muttering to himself. Yin Shang, let's go. You guys go first. Yin Shang's gaze was sharp as he looked at the overgods and Yale, who'd already been swallowed up by the lightning. I'll give them a big present. Meteor fall. Whoosh, whoosh. As soon as he finished speaking, countless flaming meteorites suddenly fell from the void above the divine palace. When Yin Shang saw the meteors, he wiped the corners of his mouth, stomped the ground, and crushed the white jade beneath his feet to dust. Then, he shot through the sky like a cannonball. The meteors covered a vast area, covering practically half of the divine palace of destruction. The overgods, who'd suffered at Yi Zichen's lightning's hands, had just escaped when they sensed something even more dangerous waiting for them. They looked up into the sky and saw that the meteors were just about to reach their noses. The scorching waves of fire and ear-piercing rumbles made the overgods' eyes bloodshot. Annihilate! At that moment a soft, slow voice sounded out from behind the overgods. They looked behind them and saw, to their astonishment, the God King of Destruction, pointing at the sky. As soon as he finished speaking, the meteorites that were about to land on the ground were really annihilated in the void, turning into thick smoke that fell like rain. This God King of Destruction really does have some skill, muttered Yin Shang as he chased after Yi Zichen. Yin Shang muttered as he chased after Yi Zichen, but he spared no effort in chasing after the great sage. The meteor's destructive power had been reduced, but the thick smoke still caused quite a bit of trouble for Yale and the others. Yale's overgods controlled the surrounding wind to disperse the smoke. The other overgods hurried to Yale's side. Master, are you all right? Yale waved his hand, and one of the overgods by his side spoke up. The Third Era's people have all fled. They've most likely gone to meet up with the people we captured earlier. Should we head over now and bring them back? How dare they attack you, Master? They've got some guts. Ha, it's fine. Yale waved his hand nonchalantly. What was even more surprising was that his eyes were still as gentle as water. Chapter 1752. The northern god race's divine palace of destruction was like the forbidden city of ancient emperors. The defenses of this city were definitely the most secure in the entire northern divine clan outside of the borders. When the Lovers' Bend riots broke out, experts continuously appeared around the divine palace, wanting to capture the enemies who were wreaking havoc within the divine palace. Unfortunately, the ice breath was too strong. The raging ice storm transformed the area into a sea of ice and snow. Any god race expert who entered this ice breath, even if they had divine power, would still become stiff and sluggish due to the icy cold energy. In a battle between experts, victory or defeat could be determined by a hair's breadth. Even a single move could cost him his life, not to mention the fact that he would need to use more than one move after his body stiffened. The sky was filled with golden-rod shadows, like a broom that covered the sky, falling from the frost storm unceasingly. The great sage's entire body was burning with a layer of golden flames. From afar, he looked like a holy Buddha with a golden body. However, his behavior was very different from that of a holy Buddha. Buddhas didn't like killing, they were compassionate. But in just a few hundred breaths of time, no fewer than 100 souls had died to the great sage's staff. Lu Er's breath of ice really saves me a lot of trouble. The great sage grinned. With Lu Er's breath of ice at his side, dealing with the other experts of the divine realm really was a lot easier. If the weaker ones entered the breath of ice's range, just defending against it would consume more than half of their divine power. Even against the great sage and Yang Jian, two killing gods, they couldn't escape death. Quite a few didn't even need the great sage to do anything. The breath of ice alone was enough to exhaust their divine power and seal them in ice and snow. Three-eyed devil, how many have you killed? The great sage tilted his head. A black blur appeared right behind the God race expert. Before long, the expert was swallowed up by the darkness. His eyes lifeless, he collapsed into the thick layer of ice and snow. Right, 110. Only after he'd finished off the expert did Yang Jian gradually reveal himself. Ha ha ha, then you've lost for sure. I've killed more than 110. There's still one more in the breath of ice. Even if I give it to you, you'll at most be able to fight me to a draw, laughed the great sage. Besides, I'll take the rest. In an instant, a hairy, thunder-mouthed monkey suddenly appeared beside the God race expert, who was still resisting tenaciously in the ice breath. Under his horrified gaze, the monkey's rod fell, and a stream of golden blood flowed out from the top of his head. 112. Are you angry? Don't be so smug. Yang Jian snorted angrily. If he hadn't been careless in the beginning, the great sage wouldn't have stolen so many kills. This big sister Lu Er's ice breath is really powerful. My heaven eye sees that there are quite a few extraterritorial celestials outside. Perhaps it's because they've seen the extent to which their predecessors have been exhausted by her ice breath that they don't dare enter. If they still dare to enter, don't talk about those useless things. A loss is a loss. Don't forget to serve tea for the next 6 months. I didn't make this bet with you. Yang Jian frowned. Besides, it's still uncertain who will win. Hey, we already said long ago that only the people in ice breath, those outside don't count. Who said it's outside? With that, Yang Jian turned into a black blur and dashed forward. The great sage squinted his eyes and looked in the direction Yang Jian left in. Only then did he see that there were still 4 people who had recklessly entered the icy storm. Brat, wait for me, old son. Yi Zichen and the others struggled to advance against the storm. Go Yuzhan walked at the very front and continuously waved his rod to divert the wind. Big sister Lu Er's ice breath is even stronger than before. Yin Shang also sent a transmission with his divine sense. Go Yuzhan, who was walking at the front, struggled so much that he couldn't even speak. There's a situation. Suddenly, Go Yuzhan, who was walking in front, stopped and looked around cautiously. The snowstorm was so huge that it was impossible to see anything beyond half a meter with the naked eye. They had been using their divine senses to investigate the situation in front of them, but just now Go Yuzhan, who was leading the way, felt a hint of danger. Go Yuzhan, who had his eyes closed, suddenly reached his rod backwards. Just as his rod was about to touch Yi Zichen, a black afterimage also appeared. Yi Yang Jian. The black blur was clearly stunned. Yi Zichen was stunned for a moment, then saw Go Yuzhan's rod strike towards Yang Jian from behind. Don't dong. Yang Jian, who had a look of confusion on his face, nearly knelt down from the blow. Yi Zichen quickly stopped him. I don't know, I couldn't hold back just now. Just now, the aura that Yang Jian released was clearly hostile towards them. How could he know that the person who came was Yang Jian? Go Yuzhan scratched his head with a wry smile. Yang Jian rubbed his back and stood up. It's fine. I did want to fight you guys just now, but Big Sister Lu Er's icy aura is too strong. I couldn't tell who it was with my divine sense at all. I thought it was those bastards of the God race. Ugh, but you really are vicious. Yang Jian grimaced in pain, while Go Yuzhan scratched his head with a coy smile. Sorry. Eat me. Hey Yeezy, why is it you guys? The great sage, who was a step behind Yang Jian, also arrived late. He glanced at Yang Jian, who was rubbing his back, then at Go Yuzhan, who was scratching his head. Uncle, Go Yuzhan lowered his head, not daring to meet the great sage's gaze. Good hit. Unexpectedly, the great sage walked over to his side and patted him heavily on the shoulder. Nephew Gu, that was a good blow. As expected of my old son's legacy. Let me see. Z's, his entire back is bruised. Alright, you have about 30% of my old son's strength. The great sage's fiery eyes of truth allowed him to easily see the condition of Yang Jian's back. When he saw the bruise on Yang Jian's back, he couldn't help but clap his hands in delight. That was a good hit. Uncle will reward you properly when we get back. Hey, thanks, Uncle. Go Yuzhan was overjoyed. Yi Zichen really had to hand it to the great sage. Even now, he was still gossiping. Seeing that Yang Jian was about to start arguing with the great sage, Yi Zichen tried to change the subject, but the great sage beat him to it. Why did you guys come here? Could it be you were captured as well? Monkey, do you know how to speak properly? Doesn't that mean we were captured? Yang Jian glared viciously at the great sage. The great sage hurriedly straightened his back and coughed. I misspoke. Don't mind the details. Easy. Why did you guys come here? Of course we came to save you, Uncle, said Go Yuzhan. You brat. I thought you were sensible just now, but now you're spouting nonsense. Who's your uncle? Can these outsider trash catch us? Do we need you to save us? Chapter 1753. This isn't a devil Dharma body. Pilar's eyes were wide open, and his eyes were filled with an indescribable horror. He was the Demon King, yet he hadn't realized at first glance that this wasn't the devil Dharma body unique to the demon race. It was far too similar. From the shadow at the beginning to the aura of the Dharma body that had condensed into a solid form, the Dharma body's aura, they were all demonic auras. However, the biggest difference between Yi Zichen's devil Dharma body and a normal one was wings. Normal devil Dharma bodies only had a pair of demonic wings and were pitch black. Yi Zichen's devil Dharma body, however, had 12 wings, especially the color of the wings. Half was black and the other half was pure white. The son of a saint and a demon. This kind of constitution really did exist. Pilar couldn't help but mutter to himself as he looked at the devil Dharma body, tainted with the evil of a demon and the purity of a god. He took a few steps back and almost fell from the sky. Be careful. The great sage grabbed him, then looked at the illusory image behind Yi Zichen in astonishment. Pure, holy feathers fell from the wings into the sky. Yale stared intently at Yi Zichen, then at the corroded palm print on his arm, dripping with golden blood. From the palm print, he sensed the demonic aura. He also sensed the holiness of the outsider's sacred race. My lord! When they saw Yale's injuries, they cried out in panic. The previously pitiful god of pain's divine power surged, and he pointed his right hand at Yi Zichen. I will bestow upon you an abyss of pain. F***ck off. Dong. While the god of pain was still casting his proverbs, the great sage had already flipped in front of him and swung his staff at the god of pain's head. You still want to bestow pain? I'll make you suffer. This was the downside of a mage meeting a warrior. The god of pain was using proverbs, so if he wasn't mistaken, he was most likely a curse type. Curse-type mages all had time to cast their spells. The great sage was clearly a close combat warrior. Just now, he'd interrupted the god of pain's attack with his staff, then sent him flying into the air. He'd beaten the god of pain until he couldn't cast any spells. Pain. The other overgods wanted to help, but Yi Zichen's people wouldn't let them go so easily. Yin Shang and Go Yuzhan both headed towards the other sovereigns. Su Luer was an ice-type mage, completely unhindered by anyone. She tossed out area of effect skills as if they were free. Darkness, taste the fear of darkness. In the end, Yi Zichen's side didn't have as many people, so some of Yale's overgods still managed to cast their spells. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire world plunged into endless darkness. Thump, a series of shrill whistles rang in everyone's ears. It felt as if there were some malicious spirits blowing in their ears. The invisible fear hidden in the darkness shrouded everyone's hearts, but, sorry, the darkness is my home field. A faint whisper suddenly rang in the ears of the Master God of Darkness. The Master God of Darkness, who was still proud of himself for casting the spell, froze in an instant. Before he could react, a pair of hands had already gripped his neck. "Do you think you're the only one who likes the darkness? I like it too." A figure suddenly appeared in the darkness. It was Yang Jian with a sneer on his face, looking at him indifferently with a mocking smile. "Humph." Several hands suddenly appeared in the darkness and reached for Yang Jian. In the blink of an eye, Yang Jian transformed into a blur and disappeared. "Enjoy the fear brought to you by the darkness." A familiar murmur came from Yang Jian's mouth. Yang Jian had been circling around the Lord God of Darkness, occasionally giving him a punch or a kick from the dark. When the Master God of Darkness resisted, he melted back into the darkness. It could be said that Yang Jian was like a fish in water, toying with the Master God of Darkness in the palm of his hand. "Darkness, dispel." The Master God of Darkness could no longer endure Yang Jian's toying, so he dispelled the darkness himself. It was as if the darkness had been torn apart. When the darkness was completely gone, everyone, including the great sage and the other overgods, remained vigilant. Yang Jian, who'd just been about to kick the Master God of Darkness again, suddenly froze. When he saw the Master God of Darkness staring at him, he scratched his head, smiled sheepishly, and waved. "Hello." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Jian ran back without looking back. The Master God of Darkness held his magic staff in his hand. From his magic staff, several black silk-like threads appeared and grabbed at Yang Jian. However, no one noticed. Suiyun, who'd previously been captured by the Rhythm God, was now unguarded and floating in the air behind Yale. Whoosh! Without even thinking about it, Yi Zichen flapped his wings with all his might. A howling gale threatened to send everyone flying. He transformed into a blur and shot forward. Little did they know, neither Yale nor any of the overgods tried to stop him. It was as if they were waiting for Yi Zichen to get to Suiyun's side. "You can't go," the war goddess suddenly shouted. However, no one could hear her from so far away. "Big sister." The maid didn't understand, but the war goddess bit her lip. Before, Yi Zichen had given her the impression that he was smart. Why was he so stupid now? This was Yale's domain of destruction. How could he possibly bring people out so easily? Everyone else was busy fighting the overgod. Only Su Yan and the others. "You can't go." By the time she said this, it was already too late. Yi Zichen really did arrive before Suiyun without any resistance. Yi Zichen fiercely hugged him, but Suiyun was already unconscious. No matter how Yi Zichen called out to him, he didn't respond. Yi Zichen gnashed his teeth and held Suiyun in his arms. Just as he was about to break out of the encirclement, a storm of destruction blocked his way. The overgods who'd been fighting the great sage and the others returned to their positions. They silently watched Yi Zichen, who was now surrounded. "Yizi!" Yang Jian and the others shouted frantically, but by then, the overgods had already surrounded Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen held Suiyun in his arms, all by himself as he faced Yale and the other overgods. "Star Lord Yi, you've made a bad move." By now, the wound on Yale's arm had completely healed. However, he was still deeply interested in Yi Zichen, who'd fused the blood of both demons and sacred beasts. Chapter 1754. The icy aura continued to wreak havoc. The Divine Palace's Imperial Guards were blocked outside the breath of ice. Yi Zichen and the others followed Yang Jian and the Great Sage, then regrouped with Su Luer and the others. From start to finish, Su Luer had remained silent and focused on maintaining her ice breath to an acceptable level. Xiao Yumei, Su Yan, and company were all present. Yi Zichen didn't know what had happened to them earlier, but with the goddess of life present, they were all alive and well, and none of them were injured. "Thank goodness you're all safe and sound. I've made you worry." Xiao Yumei's eyes flashed apologetically. When she'd impulsively decided to go to the outside, only to be captured by Yale, she'd already predicted this would happen. No matter what, Yi Zichen wouldn't abandon them. Even if they were in a sea of flames or a mountain of blades, he wouldn't. Yang Jian and the great sage both knew full well that Yi Zichen was bound to save them while they were being held captive in the God realm. As long as you're fine, that's good. Yi Zichen smiled amicably. He looked at the people he considered his closest family, his eyes brimming with relief. They were finally able to put down the fear they had been feeling all this time. They were all safe and sound. As for when he faced Yale later, so long as the great sage and the others were there, as long as he had his brothers and friends, Yi Zichen had nothing to fear. "Tell me the truth, how did you get out?" asked Yi Zichen. "We really—" The great sage seemed to want to emphasize that they'd never been captured, that they'd simply come to the outside for a stroll. However, before he could speak, Su Luer, who'd been unleashing her icy aura, suddenly knit her brows. She turned around, her gaze sharp, and she waved her hand. A raging storm of ice and snow erupted from her palm like a roaring snow dragon. Su Luer was acting this way because she'd sensed something and given a warning. The gazes of the other people also trembled, looking in the direction of the snow dragon. They saw the roaring snow dragon, fusing with the wind and frost in the air, fiercely colliding with a mirror that was condensed from the void. Bang! The snow dragon turned into snow and fell from the sky. A crack appeared in the mirror. "Humph, eat my staff!" the great sage hollered in rage. The golden cudgel in his hand filled the sky with shadows of the cudgel. The cudgel was infused with ice and snow, and it seemed like it was going to tear the sky apart. The great sage's staff landed on the already cracked surface of the mirror, and countless more cracks appeared on it. "Star Lord Yi, your subordinates are too unfriendly." Without waiting for the mirror to shatter, a hand reached out from behind the mirror, shattering it into countless fragments of crystal that blended with the wind and snow, disappearing into Su Luer's icy aura. Yale slowly walked out from the mirror with his hands behind his back. As expected, the 10 overgods under him followed him. The appearance of these people instantly increased the pressure on Yi Zichen's side. Su Luer, who had been releasing her aura of ice, also raised her eyebrows. The ice breath was cut off. She could understand if it was a large-scale defense. No matter what, this was the God race. From the time she had spent in the God race, she could tell that the experts here were more than a level higher than the God, Yao, and Fiend races. He wanted to isolate her ice breath from a certain area, or completely seal it in a certain space. Either way, she could accept it. However, what she saw now wasn't what she expected. Her ice breath had been cut off from within. In other words, the place where Yale and the others stood was less than 100 cubic meters. Everywhere else, her ice breath was normal, but there. She tried to use her ice breath to fill up that area, but found that any ice breath that reached that area would be annihilated by an invisible force. Su Luer looked deeply at Yale. The great sage and Yang Jian stood by Yale's side. Their nerves were tense, and their hands tightly gripped their weapons. This youth had left a deep impression on them. He was the reason they'd been forcibly dragged to the God race for a visit. It wasn't as if they hadn't fought back. Their crushing defeat was still fresh in their minds. "Yi Zi, this guy's abilities are incredible. Yang Jian, Lu and I joined forces, but we couldn't last more than 10 rounds against him. That's only natural. This guy isn't some rotten fish or shrimp. He's the God King of the North God race, and his title is Destruction." Yi Zichen licked his lips and transmitted back. Yang Jian and the great sage froze, while Su Luer arched her brows in surprise. The God King of Destruction? Yale's 10 overgods glared at them like tigers watching their prey. 10 auras on par with the God, Yao, and demon emperors surrounded Yi Zichen and the others. It seemed they were trapped, but they didn't care too much. Yi Zichen and the others had already anticipated this situation. At the end of the day, this was Yale's territory. Keeping them here would be a piece of cake. The God King of Destruction. Star Lord Yi. Their gazes met. Yi Zichen's gaze was solemn, but Yale's eyes lit up with a hint of a smile. It was just as he'd said from the very beginning. They wanted to leave, but they couldn't. He hadn't set up any inescapable trap for Yi Zichen's group. Just the 10 overgods under his command were more than enough to keep Yi Zichen and the others in the outside god realm for all eternity. Lord Yale, my people have already met up with me. I presume there's no need to continue this friendly competition you spoke of. In that case, shouldn't you keep your word and let me take my people back to the Third Era? Star Lord Yi, you don't want to stay here as a guest? The god race is great, and Lord Yale is very hospitable. Forgive me for not wanting to stay here any longer. That's quite a pity. Yale chuckled. In truth, Star Lord Yi could have left with your people, and I wouldn't force you to stay. I've always been a man of my word, but… He waved his hand, and a man covered in wounds appeared behind Yale. He had a long scar over his left eye. When they looked closely, they saw that this was the god of pain Yale had sent to bring Xiao Yumei and the others back. Look. Yale pointed at the god of pain's face, then at his arm, which was still dripping with golden blood. I clearly agreed to bring your people here, but Star Lord Yi set up an ambush in secret and injured them so badly. Isn't that a bit too much? If I don't get justice for him, how can I convince the masses in the future? God King of Destruction, I don't quite understand what you're saying. Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. I presume you've been keeping an eye on our movements ever since we entered the outside. There's no way you didn't know exactly how many people came to visit. From start to finish, my people were right under your nose. How could they possibly injure the god of pain? Chapter 1755. Dong. Monkey, watch out. Up in the sky, Yang Jian transformed into a black mist and appeared in front of the great sage. He swung his three-pointed, double-edged sword 180 degrees, and the silver light collided with the golden patterns that were surging toward him with a deafening boom. After neutralizing the golden patterns, Yang Jian looked back to see the great sage heading straight for the realm of destruction. Ice wall. As Su Luer spoke, a wall of ice appeared in front of the great sage. The great sage stopped. Su Luer, Xiao Yumei, and Su Yen landed in front of him. What are you doing? Don't go. Given our cultivation, there's no way we can break through this barrier. Su Luer's icy blue eyes stared ahead. 100 meters in front of them was the realm of destruction where Yale and his overgods were. There wasn't anything special about the outer region, but as soon as they got close, the destructive power of destruction completely annihilated their attacks. Both the great sage and Yang Jian had tried many times, but to no avail. As for Yi Zichen, he was inside, facing off against Yale and the other overgods. But Yi Zi and the benefactor who saved us are still inside. There's nothing we can do about it. Besides, whoosh whoosh whoosh, countless swords whistled through the air like a rain of swords. Yin Shang and the others' gazes froze. Su Luer looked indifferently at the dense mass of figures before them. Our situation here isn't any better. The realm of destruction. Yi Zichen stood in the center with Su Yun in his arms. Around him were Yale's 10 overgods. Although the situation was dire, all Yi Zichen did was treat Su Yun's injuries. He kept feeding him precious pills. At the same time, he understood everything. Injuring himself to gain sympathy. Yale had put on an act. The god of pain was no longer in his previous wretched state, although he was still injured. Perhaps Su Yun had hurt him, but not as badly as he'd expected. This was all part of Yale's plan. The more he thought about it, the more resentment Yi Zichen felt. The god of pain had clearly only suffered some superficial wounds, but Yale and the others had injured Su Yun so badly. Yale. It was all because of him. Star Lord Yi, why are you looking at me like that? Yale hovered high in the sky and looked down at Yi Zichen. His brows arched as if he were toying with Yi Zichen. I invited you here as a guest. I never thought of fighting against you. It was like that in the beginning, and it's still like that now. Yi Zichen smiled indifferently, then glanced at the great sage and the others, who were still caught up in the maelstrom. Yale obviously noticed the look in his eyes and smiled. I had no choice but to do this. The person in your arms is an enemy of the Outerium, so I should be the one to deal with it. But you overstepped your authority and deliberately wanted to get involved in this matter. Naturally, I can only treat you as his accomplice. As long as you hand him over to me, I can swear to heaven and earth. I will let you and your men leave, and I will not stop you. The wind suddenly became stronger than before. The howling winds caused Yi Zichen's clothes to flap wildly, and the clouds in the sky slowly drifted in the direction the wind blew. Yi Zichen looked up with an indiscernible smile, but said nothing. Instead, he slowly rose to his feet. The surrounding overgods followed his example and prepared for battle. Yale narrowed his eyes. Star Lord Yi, you're determined to persist in your errors. Suddenly, Yi Zichen touched his left eye. The blindfold that had been sealing his left eye fell off, and the purple starlight that belonged to the Emperor's star dripped down from his eye like a tear. As he fell through the air, the tear condensed from starlight transformed into threads that wrapped tightly around Su Yun and Yi Zichen's back. Yi Zichen's left hand glowed with golden light. A long sword shining with golden light fell into his hand. The moment he held the sword, his aura became much stronger than before. Yun, I'll take you out of here. As soon as he said that, Yi Zichen's gaze narrowed. He gripped the Xianyuan sword tightly and attacked the overgod. My esteemed guest, Star Lord Yi, has lost control of his emotions. Help me calm him down. Up in the sky, Yale roared. The 10 overgods beneath him instantly charged towards Yi Zichen. Shouted the maidservant outside the divine palace. The goddess of war clenched her fists so tightly that her fingernails dug into her palms. Golden blood dripped from her palms. Big sister, your hand. The maidservant's gaze froze, and she hurriedly took out a handkerchief to bandage her wound. However, the goddess of war clenched her fists tightly and bit down on her lips. She really wanted to go over. Ever since Yale attacked Yi Zichen and the others, this thought had been lingering in the goddess of war's sea of consciousness for a long time. But reason told her that even if she went over now, it would be no use. If she went over now, she'd be making an enemy out of Yale. She might as well wait until Yi Zichen and the others were defeated and Yale wanted to execute them. Then, she could speak up for them and perhaps spare their lives. All she could do was endure until the end. Scram! With the Xianyuan sword in hand, Yi Zichen was like a god of slaughter. Every time he swung his sword, the devil Dharma body behind him copied his movements and smashed into the surrounding overgods. He had the devil Dharma body, the Xianyuan sword, and the radiance of the Emperor's star. For a moment, he didn't fall into a disadvantageous position despite being surrounded by the overgods. Yale, who stood proudly in the sky, wasn't just there to watch the show. He hadn't immediately suppressed Yi Zichen because he sensed something strange about his devil Dharma body. As Yi Zichen fought the overgods, he'd been paying close attention to Yi Zichen's flaws. As for that flaw, after observing for so long, he'd finally found it. Rather than saying it was Yi Zichen's flaw, it was more accurate to say it was his burden. That flaw was annihilate. Yale tossed out a small black hole-like sphere. Shockingly, it headed straight for Su Yun, who stood behind Yi Zichen. Humph! Although Yi Zichen was fighting the overgods, his attention had never left Su Yun. As soon as Yale released the black sphere, Yi Zichen snorted coldly. His wings instantly unfurled and enveloped him and Su Yun. Boom! The black sphere landed on the devil Dharma body's wings, shattering one of them. Yi Zichen, who was the core of the devil Dharma body, coughed up a mouthful of blood. Star Lord Yi, you've lost. At that moment, Yale suddenly landed and shook his head regretfully. When Yi Zichen heard this, he wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth and smiled bitterly. I lost. Yi Zichen admitted that Yale's attack had seriously injured him, but if he said he'd lost now, you really have lost. Yale's expression was still as regretful as ever. Star Lord Yi, have you not noticed? There are only 10 overgods here, but 11 should be here. As soon as he said this, Yi Zichen, who'd been about to mock Yale for his arrogance, suddenly froze. He turned to look at Suiyun, only to discover that Suiyun, who'd looked like he was on the verge of death, was now smiling at him. Furthermore, his right hand flickered with purple flames. Chapter 1756. If you want to pin a crime on someone, you can always find a pretext. There were countless ways to force Yi Zichen and the others to stay, but using the ruse of self-injury to gain their confidence was far too low level. What level was the master god of pain at? The minister of the right, who focused on martial arts, had less than a 50% chance of victory against these sovereigns. Who else could injure him to such an extent? Could it be the 3 emperors of the god, Yao, and demon races? They'd been by Yi Zichen's side since the first era, yet Yale insisted on saying they were his subordinates. No. Suddenly Yi Zichen's expression froze. Who said the outsiders were all by his side? Emperor Hades' Suiyun wasn't with them? It was just that Yi Zichen had always viewed him as a brother, not a subordinate. That was why he despised him when Yale said his subordinate had injured the god of pain. If it really was Suiyun, it wasn't impossible. One had to know that any underworld emperor's cultivation level was infinitely close to that of the 3 emperors. It was even possible that the underworld emperor's cultivation level was higher than the 3 emperors. Yi Zichen's expression didn't look too good, but Yale didn't get angry at his scolding. She looked at the change in his expression with interest and immediately pulled the corners of her mouth into a smile. It seems that this king has wronged Star-Lord Yi. Just now, this king caught a severely injured person and thought that he was Star-Lord Yi's subordinate. Since Star-Lord Yi has spoken to this extent, I believe you. Then please take your people and leave. When he heard that, Yi Zichen's pupils contracted violently. There was no need to think too much about it. Yi Zichen already knew who the person Yale had captured was. It was definitely Suiyun. Furthermore, he was the only one who had the ability to heavily injure the master god of pain and rescue Xiao Yumei and the others. Who is that person? What? Star-Lord Yi is interested in him? Yale pursed his lips into a smile and lightly clapped his hands. Before long, one of the overgods under Yale appeared before everyone with a black-robed, bloodied young man with disheveled hair and a drooping head. When they saw him, Yang Jian and the great sage's pupils constricted. The only reason they were like this was because this person was the one who had saved them from their lover. However, this person had been wearing a mask all this time, and his moves were very strange. Neither of them had recognized this person's true identity. However, the great sage and the others would never mistake his black robe for someone else. Yi Zichen clenched his right hand tightly, and his chest heaved violently. He couldn't be mistaken. The black-robed youth in front of him, who had been beaten to the brink of death, was his best friend since university. The current Emperor Mingyi, Suiyun. This is me. Let him go. What does Star-Lord Yi mean by this? Yale frowned slightly, and a hint of anger flashed across his face. Star-Lord Yi has already clearly said that he's not one of your people, yet you still want to interfere in this matter. Furthermore, you're ordering me around. Don't you think you've overstepped your boundaries? I told you to let him go. Rumble, thunder from the 9th heaven. As Yi Zichen spoke, a turbulent aura swept out of his body. The sky, which was covered with snow and ice, was instantly covered by dark clouds. The dark clouds looked gloomy as if a thunderstorm was about to fall. Crimson thunderstorms roared between the clouds as if they were about to destroy the world. Flames raged on Yi Zichen's body, and the rising steam was dyed blood-red. As soon as the steam appeared, the surrounding ice storm froze it. It transformed into countless red ice crystals, which fell to the ground like hail. The blood-red mist was Yi Zichen's murderous aura. Yi Zichen didn't devour or kill. Even in a war-torn world like the gods, Yao, and demons, he still cherished and revered life as an ordinary person in the modern realm. He absolutely wouldn't kill the innocent, so he naturally didn't have any murderous aura on him. But now, raging murderous aura surged out of his body like a tidal wave. In the blink of an eye, everything within 100 miles was dyed crimson. Standing behind him were Xiao Yumei, Su Yan, and Su Lu. Everyone who knew him and knew his personality couldn't help but stare wide-eyed. They stared at Yi Zichen, who was like a giant beast from the abyss, and their eyes were filled with unfamiliarity. Was this man with such overwhelming murderous aura really the Yi Zichen they once knew? The blood-red murderous aura grew stronger and stronger. Ripples appeared in the sky above the god realm, following the waves of murderous aura and rushing towards Yale and his overgods. The goddess of war and her handmaidens hadn't left since the explosion of the Lover's Bend. They watched everything unfold intently. Yi Zichen's murderous aura had already enveloped them. The handmaidens, who'd never seen blood before, were terrified. They licked their lips and looked at the goddess of war. Big sister. She was terrified. She'd been born into the god realm. Although her parents were ordinary people at the bottom of the hierarchy, outsiders didn't dare harbor any ill intentions against them. She'd never experienced war, but she'd luckily been chosen by the goddess of war and became her personal handmaiden. Later, she was placed by Yale's side as a spy. It was fair to say that in the 100 years since she'd been born, she'd practically never seen the blood of a living person. Yi Zichen's murderous aura felt like a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It was the aura of someone who'd truly killed someone. The handmaidens had never experienced anything like this before. Their legs trembled involuntarily. Especially now that Yale and Yi Zichen were at loggerheads, she was truly worried that they'd start fighting. Big sister, what should we do now? The handmaidens rubbed their hands, their eyes brimming with anxiety. Little did they know, the goddess of war was just as worried as they were. How could this be? Muttered the goddess of war to herself. She looked at Yi Zichen, who was completely enraged like an agitated lion. Her brows furrowed with anxiety. There's no way you're his match. Since he told you to leave, why don't you? Others might not know Yale's methods, but the goddess of war knew them all too well. Even in her perfect form, at her peak, she couldn't last more than 100 rounds against Yale. And that was assuming he didn't use the profound truths of destruction. If he used them, you're such an idiot. Outside, the goddess of war was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Inside, Yi Zichen's fury had reached a boiling point. He glared viciously at Yale, his right eye bloodshot. Let him go. Chapter 1757. To the north of the Divine Palace, it was hard to imagine how many outsiders there were. Countless experts flew through the air, burning the power of their godheads, as if they'd cast aside their own lives and entered the range of the breath of ice. Even with Su Lu-er's breath of ice keeping them in check, the great sage and the others couldn't help but feel their scalps go numb when they saw so many enemies swarming in. Kids kill. In the face of so many outsider experts, Yi Zichen's subordinates had no chance of victory at all. The great sage grabbed several fistfuls of monkey hair, then blew out tens of thousands of monkeys to fight the outsider experts. Yang Jian even used a technique he hadn't used in tens of thousands of years, transforming beings into soldiers and summoning countless heavenly soldiers. Although they couldn't compare to the outsider experts at all, they could at least relieve some of the pressure on the great sage and the others. Lu-er, increase the intensity of your breath of ice. Only the great sage had the guts to call Su Lu-lu. The Rui Jingu bang in his hand continuously landed on the bodies of the alien experts. The intense battle also caused him to pant uncontrollably. There was some fatigue in his eyes. I don't need you to tell me that. As soon as he spoke, the surrounding breath of ice surged even more violently than before. By now, Su Lu-er's hair had turned the color of ice crystals. Her eyes narrowed into slits as she activated her breath of ice to its strongest state. By her side, Su Yan didn't care about her divine power consumption in the slightest. Her breath of recovery buoyed the experts fighting at the front. So long as they were injured in the slightest, it would instantly heal their wounds. "Ol Yang, how many have you killed?" The great sage took care of yet another outsider expert with a single swing of his staff. He panted heavily at the shadowy figure of Yang Jian. His Rui Jingu Bang had long since been soaked in golden blood. When he straightened it, golden blood dripped from the surface. "I lost count," replied Yang Jian, panting. Suddenly, the space behind the great sage warped, and a sinister-looking old man emerged from the warped space. "Monkey, behind you!" Before Yang Jian could even speak, the great sage sensed danger behind him. He swung his long rod behind him, but to his surprise, the rod that he had intended to send the old man flying didn't appear. Instead, the rod was grabbed by someone. Suddenly, the great sage turned around and saw a black-robed man with a blurry face grabbing his staff. "Oh, I almost got injured by accident." The black-robed man loosened his grip on the staff and swung it around. When the great sage saw him, his eyes widened. What about me?" The black-robed man waved his hand and laughed. "Don't mind it too much. I don't blame you. But don't be careless at this time. The people of the Outer Realm God race aren't mediocre." "No, why are you here? Why can't I be here?" The black-robed man was stunned for a moment. "After I let you out, I was targeted by the Over-God here. I've been on the run all this time. Just now, I sensed the commotion of a battle, so I came over to take a look." "No," the great sage's lips quivered, but no words came out. He stared at the black-robed man for a long time. At this moment, Yang Jian also rushed over. When he saw the black-robed man, he also revealed a shocked expression. "What's going on with you guys?" The black-robed man's tone was filled with confusion. Yang Jian shouted, "Why are you here? Who's that with Yizi?" As soon as he said that, the black-robed man, the great sage, and Yang Jian's expressions froze. They looked in the direction of Yale's domain of destruction, and just happened to see. Splurt. Yi Zichen coughed up a mouthful of bright red blood with a hint of gold. He clutched his chest and knelt on the ground. Su Yun, who he'd been carrying on his back, also separated from him and landed beside Yale. "Master! Well done, Thousand Faces." Su Yun knelt on one knee in front of Yale. Yale smiled and nodded in satisfaction. Yi Zichen knelt on the ground, his eyes filled with unwillingness. He saw Su Yun, who'd just been heavily injured and on the verge of death, gradually transform into someone else. A fake. This person wasn't Su Yun. Yi Zichen had considered that the Over-God of Pain's injuries were a ruse, and he'd also considered the fact that no one was watching over Su Yun. Danger awaited him here. The only thing he hadn't considered was that Su Yun was also a fake. If Su Yun were still conscious, Yi Zichen absolutely wouldn't have fallen for such a low-level scheme. It was precisely because Su Yun was so badly injured that Yi Zichen was so worried about his survival. Cough. No matter how much he'd calculated, he'd still fallen for Yale's trap, and such a low-level one at that. When he considered this, Yi Zichen's heart burned with fury. He coughed up another mouthful of blood, and even more blood flowed from his wounds. "Star-Lord Yi, your injuries are too severe. Do you want me to send someone to treat you?" Yale chuckled as he descended from the sky and slowly walked over. Yi Zichen's Devil Dharma body was strange, so Yale didn't want to put himself in danger. Of course, if he wanted to, he could still forcefully break Yi Zichen's strange Devil Dharma body. However, if there was an easier way, why not use it? As the Third Era's Master of the Stars, Yi Zichen was Yale's greatest obstacle in his future plans to destroy the Third Era. Yale had begun gathering information on Yi Zichen a few years ago. Whether it was his temperament or his complicated relationships, Yale knew them all by heart. In summary, Yale had found Yi Zichen's weakness, his most fatal weakness. It was, he valued relationships too much. Normally, Yi Zichen could remain absolutely calm, and he could clearly analyze any problem. However, when his friends and family were in danger, he became impulsive. The closer someone was to him, the more impulsive he became. Su Yun, the new emperor of the River Styx, was Yi Zichen's best friend. As soon as Su Yun entered the outside, he entered Yale's line of sight. He also knew that Yi Zichen knew that Su Yun had also entered the outside. Yale had deliberately ordered Su Yun to release the great sage and the others he'd captured earlier, then set up a trap for Yi Zichen to fall into. He'd thought it'd take more effort to lure Yi Zichen into this low-level trap, but it went so smoothly. Yi Zichen's chest was pierced through. Starlight and divine power flowed outwards, and the demonic Dharma body behind him gradually dissipated without the support of spiritual energy. Yi Zichen knelt on the ground all by himself. Under Yale's gaze, he couldn't resist in the slightest. In truth, this sort of blood loss could easily knock someone unconscious, but the pain in his chest kept Yi Zichen awake. He looked silently at Yale and saw the smile on his face. "Your Excellency, this feast at Hongmen, you've truly planned it meticulously," said Yi Zichen. "If this can make Star Lord Yi feel better, you can think of it this way. But in truth, this is nothing more than a sudden thought." Yale smiled calmly. "Star Lord Yi, there's no need to worry. I won't kill you." The letter made it clear. If you want to stay here as a guest, all you have to do is stay until the end of the Third Era." "Ha! Ha ha!" Yi Zichen threw his head back and laughed, but as he laughed, blood leaked from his mouth. "Stay as a guest until the end of the Third Era? Your Excellency, forgive me, but I cannot agree." Chapter 1758. The blood-colored rage condensed under the ice breath, falling from the sky like a blood-colored hail. Yi Zichen, who was in a stalemate, could no longer contain his anger. Especially when he saw that Su Yun hadn't struggled at all from start to finish. He hadn't even moved a finger. It was as if fuel had been poured into his heart, and it burned even more fiercely. The goddess of war, who was watching this scene, was stunned. What did Yi Zichen just say? Was he threatening Yale? Why was he being so irrational? Who was Yale? He was the divine king of the northern god tribe, the divine king of destruction. Never mind people like Yi Zichen and the others from the lower realms, not even god kings of the same level as him would dare utter such treasonous threats. Is he a fool? The war goddess was so angry that her hands were shaking. She clenched her fists and stared at them. She was very worried, but she didn't rush over. Or rather, now was not the time for her to appear. The maid had long since been scared out of her wits. No matter how shocking Yi Zichen's words were, she wasn't surprised at all. In her opinion, this might be the saying, "The ignorant are fearless." "How dare you!" "Impudent!" Yale's overgods were similarly shocked, but they quickly leapt to their feet and pointed angrily at Yi Zichen's face. At the same time, the great sage and the others also took a step forward. His divine power was madly channeled, and the power of the stars streaked across the sky. Before they truly started fighting, both sides had already tested each other with their divine powers, causing the pressure here to be so heavy that anyone who was not a Dharch would definitely explode and die. The storm generated by the collision turned this place into a vacuum. Yes, it was at this moment that the Outerium god race and Ji Yuan were at daggers drawn. In truth, considering the pros and cons, Yi Zichen's decision to leave was the most advantageous for them. Unfortunately, Yi Zichen valued relationships too much. Su Yun's relationship with him was too strong. Yi Zichen couldn't just ignore him. When he saw that he was almost dead, his emotions reached a boiling point. He was hysterical and irrational. Yi Zichen's team needed someone with a clear head to analyze the situation for them, but Su Yun was the great sage and Yang Jian's savior. Seeing their benefactor in trouble, of course they couldn't just stand by and watch. As for Yin Shang and Go Yuzhan, they had already vaguely sensed the true identity of the person bathed in blood. Literati star. As 4 stars, they naturally would not leave him here. Since they both had irrational reasons, they might as well make a big fuss. Release him. The abyss's devilish murmurs reverberated in everyone's ears. Only then did they notice that the illusory image of a demon had appeared behind Yi Zichen. Devil's Dharmakaya. Pilar's eyes narrowed. Others might not be able to tell, but as the fiend king of the fiend race, there was no way he wouldn't be able to tell. Although Yi Zichen's devil dharma body hadn't fully condensed yet, the few illusory images he released were enough for Pilar to recognize his true appearance. How could he possibly condense it? Pilar's heart was filled with horror. Yi Zichen had stolen the devil dharma body from him. Although he was infuriated that Yi Zichen had stolen his demonic scriptures, he knew that even if Yi Zichen stole them, he wouldn't be able to cultivate them. The first condition to condense a devil's dharmakaya was the abyss devil race's bloodline. Yi Zichen was clearly a demon, Yao, and God. Even demons couldn't meet the requirements of a fiend's bloodline. In Pilar's eyes, it was not a big deal to snatch the secret manual. But he'd actually succeeded. He'd actually found all the materials he needed to forge a devil dharma body, and he'd condensed it. Could it be that this person had some sort of connection to the demons? Oh, a devil dharma body! Among them, one of them recognized the illusory image behind Yi Zichen. It was Yale. In truth, the ones who understood him best were his enemies. The demons and gods shared a border, and there was constant friction between them. The gods naturally knew a great deal about the demons, and Yale was their leader. As soon as Yi Zichen's illusory image appeared, Yale was certain it was the devil dharma body. How interesting! The secret of the Fiend clan was actually passed on by Pilar to an outsider. It seems the demons really have no chance of turning the tables. That's why he had no choice but to cooperate with outsiders. Yale narrowed his eyes and chuckled to himself. It had to be said that the demons were on the same level as the gods. When the devil dharma body appeared, Yale's subordinates sensed a familiar pressure. This was something they'd never sensed from Yi Zichen before. As the illusory devil dharma body gradually condensed, Yi Zichen's aura grew stronger and stronger, and his demonic aura stirred up more and more terrifying storms. Gradually, countless tornadoes appeared around them. The raging tempest caused Yang Jian and the Outlander overgods to retreat uncontrollably. Yale was still smiling as he spoke. Star-Lord Yi, why are you so angry? Let him go. Star-Lord Yi, this is the outside's business. You've been threatening me all this time, trying to force me to let him go. I've lost a lot of faith. If you don't let him go, you'll die. Just because of your devil dharma body. Yale's gaze was filled with indescribable disdain. Try me and you'll know. With that, Yi Zichen shot forward like an explosive cannonball. Red light streaked across the sky, leaving a perfect arc in the air. Then he slammed his palm down viciously on Yale. The devil dharma body was the foundation of the demon race. Up until now, the demons had relied on the devil dharma body to maintain the balance of power. In order to break that balance, Yale had studied the devil dharma body for 1,000 years. Even now, if he said his understanding of the devil dharma body was second, no one in the outside would dare claim to be first. When it came to devil dharma bodies, who could compare to a devil king like Pilar? However, Yi Zichen was the one who'd told the other god kings about the devil dharma body's weaknesses. Yi Zichen was but a beginner. In Yale's eyes, the devil dharma body was nothing more than a toy. If he really wanted to break the balance of power with the devil dharma body, then that was ridiculous. Yi Zichen was right in front of him. It looked like Yi Zichen was about to succeed, but in truth, if Yale wanted to, he could easily dodge. However, he didn't. He wanted to use reality to tell Yi Zichen that the devil dharma body he relied on was nothing in front of him. With a devil dharma body like that, a single slap from him. Cough! Golden blood flowed down Yale's arm. His hand was still in the same position as before, but the image of Yi Zichen being sent flying didn't appear. Instead, his arm, a corroded handprint, appeared. At the same time, the gods by Yale's side, Yang Jian and the others by Yi Zichen's side, and the war goddess, who'd been watching the entire time, were all stunned. Chapter 1759. A pitch-black tower suddenly appeared, glowing with light. As soon as it appeared, a heavy, oppressive aura washed over them. The howling winds made it impossible for the surrounding overgods to look directly at it. Dense clouds emanated from the tower. All of a sudden, two blurry shadows appeared in the clouds. As soon as they appeared, hearty, boorish laughter rang out. "Brat, you haven't even paid me my wages yet, and now you want me to do your hard labor?" Yi Zichen finally relaxed at the familiar, wild tone. Naturally, this was the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's Song Xiong speaking to him like this. "I'll make it up to you once we get back." "Fine, I'll trust you this one time." The hearty laughter lingered for a long time. Yale narrowed his eyes and tried to peer inside. What surprised him was that the clouds and mist released by the tower were very strange. Despite his current cultivation, he couldn't even extend his divine sense inside. As soon as he touched the clouds, he felt an invisible force crush his divine sense. Even with divine power in his eyes, he couldn't see through the clouds with his naked eye. All he could see were two people standing within the cloud. If nothing unexpected happened, they were Yi Zichen's final trump card. At that moment, beneath the hazy clouds, scarlet light flared, and the surrounding temperature skyrocketed. The overgods felt like they'd been thrown into a furnace. Sweat poured down their faces like rain. Yale's ear-piercing cry caused the space of destruction around him to tremble violently. The overgods instinctively used the power of their godheads to seal off their hearing. Gradually, the light from the fire dimmed and turned into a faint red shadow under the cover of the clouds. "There's someone else." Yale's expression froze. When Qing Lan and Song Xiong appeared, they hadn't released any auras, so he couldn't directly determine their cultivation levels. But the flames just now were different. They were oppressive and scorching, as if they wanted to incinerate the heavens and the earth. Throughout the entire god realm, he couldn't find anything that could compare to this kind of pure heat. The waves of heat they just released were no different from the perpetually burning sun. "You're here too." When he saw the flames, Yi Zichen immediately understood the newcomer's identity. Of the three demon emperors in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, the three-legged golden crow had the worst relationship with him. Who would have thought that he would disregard the conflict between the two of them and lend a helping hand at such a time? "Humph, useless brat." The three-legged golden crow's tone was as cold as ever. He glanced emotionlessly at Yi Zichen. "If you're going to die, why don't you choose a good place to die? Don't you think you're embarrassing the epoch by dying in the barbarian race's territory? You're not afraid of losing face, but I'm afraid of losing face." Yi Zichen couldn't detect even the slightest hint of emotion in his reply, but he didn't feel any reluctance. All he felt was gratitude. The three-legged golden crow's words were rather domineering as well. He was the only one who dared to say something like that, even in front of so many overgods and godly monarchs. Just spit it out. "I really don't know how Yale and the others will react when they hear this," but before Yale and the others could get angry, Song Xiong was already unhappy. "Hey, Firebird, can you talk?" "What? Big Brother Qinglan and I are from this place as well. Your King bringing us in as well." "Oh, is that so?" The three-legged golden crow nodded. "Senior Lan isn't one of us. As for you, was I wrong to say you're a barbarian? You?" Song Xiong was furious. Without even thinking about it, he reached out and grabbed the three-legged golden crow. Unfortunately, there was no way Qinglan would let him run amok. Song Xiong could only gnash his teeth in hatred and glare at the three-legged golden crow. Just now, Song Xiong and the others had actually called him and Qinglan from the outside realm. "How are you? Can you hold on?" Qinglan stopped Song Xiong and the three-legged golden crow's bickering, then landed in front of Yi Zichen and examined his injuries. "I'm fine. I didn't hurt any vital parts. That's for the best. Focus on healing and leave this place to the three of us. But don't get your hopes up. No matter what, this is a godly monarch. We're not completely confident in our ability to get you out of here. Hey kid, did you hear what Big Brother Qinglan said? The mission is extremely difficult, so we need to pay you at least 10 times as much, said Song Xiong with a chuckle. If we make it out of here, I'll let you drink as much peach juice as you want. You said it. I said it. Yi Zichen nodded firmly, then turned to Qinglan. Uncle Lan, I'll have to trouble you. If we really can't win, you can just return to the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. I'll do my best. Yi Zichen nodded solemnly. Song Xiong, on the other hand, twisted his arms back and forth as if he were stretching. His large eyes swept over the lords and Yale. Qinglan also turned around at this moment. The moment he turned around, the gentleness on his face vanished into thin air. His entire body emanated a somber aura. His lips pressed together, and his eyes narrowed into slits. Let's go, Song Xiong. Let's go say hello to our old friends. Outside the clouds. Yale and the chief gods under him were all staring at the clouds in front of them. They could tell that the conversation between Qinglan and the others inside the clouds had not been heard by Yale and the others. Otherwise, when the three-legged golden crow mentioned that the god race was the barbarian race, it was impossible for them to not react. Since Qinglan and the others hadn't appeared yet, Yale and the others hadn't rashly entered. Master! The Lord of Rhythm knelt on one knee. Just now, he'd received Yale's orders to leave the domain of destruction. Now that he'd returned, he was clearly ready to report back. The elite aura-breaking beasts have all been driven here. They're at your disposal, Master. Outside the domain of destruction, the frost was still the same. However, there were now hundreds of illusory buildings, each the size of a building. When the great sage and the others saw this, their hearts trembled. They all recognized these creatures. They were the outsiders' unique aura-breaking beasts. At a rough estimate, there were more than 100 of them. They were heading in the direction of Yi Zichen's domain of destruction. Yizi, Yang Jian, the great sage, and Su Yun's eyes were bloodshot. They threw caution to the wind and killed the aura-breaking beast. They couldn't enter the domain of destruction, but at the very least, they couldn't put Yi Zichen under even more pressure. At that moment, the space around the divine palace suddenly trembled violently. Everyone saw an enormous shadow appear, blotting out the sky. As soon as it appeared, it vanished in a blur. It grabbed two of the aura-breaking beasts in the sky, then tossed them into its mouth and bit them to pieces. At the same time, Yale's annihilation space was smashed apart by this enormous shadow. The sovereigns all hurriedly retreated, but Yale remained standing there, his eyes shining as he stared forward. It's you. It's me.